It's about collaborative action on challenges facing the planet. Don't ignore us. You can also see how we're very vigorous, very active in other forums and working through other diplomatic channels.
Time for our final expert witness.
Part 4. Back to Basics.
The United Nations Security Council at the present moment is probably going through one of the worst moments of its history.
Mona Ali Khalil is a former senior legal officer of the UN Office of the Legal Council.
We need to go back and look at the UN Charter not as a set of ideals, but rather as a set of imperatives, of responsibilities, affirmative duties that we owe to each other as nations and that each nation owes to its own people. So if the Council and if the permanent members wish to retain their primacy in the legal order, in the security order, it is far better for them to live up to their responsibilities, to respect themselves, respect the principles and prohibitions of the Charter, and to ensure that they are credible advocates for those principles and prohibitions so that others will refrain from committing the violations. I think it really is about the return to basic principles.
Mona Ali Khalil is also co-editor and co-author of the book Empowering the UN Security Council, Reforms to Address Modern Threats.
I suggest that we look at ways of improving the ability of council members and of the UN membership at large to work in a manner that does not require an amendment to the Charter. The book discusses 10 different ways that the broader membership of the UN, including the elected membership of the Security Council, can work through existing tools, existing mechanisms to overcome the veto in order to ensure that there is a UN response to aggression, a UN response to mass atrocity crimes that can fulfill the promise of the Charter and the promise of the UN to the peoples of the world. It would include the international courts, both the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court.
The International Court of Justice is another UN main body. The International Criminal Court is an independent organisation.
It would include the regional arrangements. It would include action under national courts, under universal jurisdiction. There's a plethora of paths to peace, to justice, to accountability that do not require amendment of the Charter and therefore would not give any one permanent member a right to veto such solutions.
We've already heard about the Uniting for Peace resolution. It allows the UN General Assembly to deal with threats to peace when the Security Council is deadlocked.
So we have precedents where in order to ensure the will of the international community, there would be a way for the membership to fulfill the bigger responsibility of the UN when the Security Council itself is paralyzed and unable to do so because of a veto of one or more states.
Ideas for reforming the Security Council to secure its main mission to make the world a safer place have been coming for years. So what might a radical change mean for its 5 permanent members?
So if we dare to imagine another system, we would still have to deal with these big powers. We would have to either incentivize them to join us again and or find a way to function without them, which is exactly where we are now. So why not work within the Charter that we have that gives us roadmaps to peace and security, that gives us roadmaps to not only self-determination of peoples, but the human rights of all persons, as well as sustainable development. That was exactly why the Stalins and the Churchills and the Roosevelts of the world came to these conclusions: to avoid war, to avoid genocide, to avoid the poverty and the human rights violations that give rise to the radicalization and extremism that creates wars and genocides and other mass atrocity crimes. So we need to go back and look at our Charter not just as a moral instrument or a legal instrument, but very much as a survival instrument.
So back to our main question. Is the UN Security Council still relevant? Yes, for its ability to bring world powers together to discuss world problems. It's a no for the makeup of its permanent membership, which doesn't represent the way the world is now. Both the UN and many of its member states recognise that reform is essential, but there's no consensus on how to do it. That's concerning for an organisation set up to find collective solutions to collective problems. Last word to our expert witness, Dr. Samir Puri.
And the final sort of observation on that is the UN Security Council becomes this sort of ornament that's out of date. Everybody sort of respects the fact it exists, but everybody also accepts that it just can't do anything, and you work around it. And you don't tend to take its disputes, its failure to agree, as an indication of anything other than further confirmation of its own obsolescence.
This edition of The Inquiry was written and presented by me, Charmaine Cozier. The producer was Jill Collins, researcher Maeve Schaffer, editor Tom Bigwood, and technical producer Craig Boardman.
That was The Inquiry from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho here on CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba. You are listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, everywhere on the CBC Listen app and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in this morning for Marcy Marcusa. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, right now we are under a mainly clear sky in Winnipeg. -4 right now. It's a cold start to the day. We're going to get more on your forecast coming up. But first, let's get the very latest on our morning headlines. Joining us now from the CBC Manitoba News Centre is Heather Wells. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's premier reacting to yesterday's federal budget. He sees positives for the province. Wab Kinew says mentions of the Port of Churchill in Ottawa's spending plan are good for the province. But he says one area of concern is a lack of bilateral funding for healthcare, like one agreement, which is set to expire next year. That was one that pays for hospital and home care staff for staff to be in hospitals and home care. So we're going to hear more from Wab Kinew and also from Winnipeg's mayor reacting to yesterday's budget. A Winnipeg veterinarian has been ordered to stop his veterinary practice at the end of June next year. The decision against Dr. Wen Chao Zhang follows a regulatory hearing by the Manitoba Veterinary Medical Association. We'll hear about it coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells with your morning headlines. We are at -4, as I mentioned, on our way to a high of 6 degrees under a mainly sunny sky today here in Winnipeg. Still above seasonal. Tonight, partly cloudy and -4. And then this is where conditions really changed. I know for some folks, they probably have their winter tires on already. We're looking at 3 degrees, starting off the day with rain, becoming a mix of rain and snow by the afternoon. And then that precipitation continues into Thursday night and a low of -4. We're going to have plenty of follow-up here to the federal budget, which came down yesterday. We have a jam-packed show today. We're going to get reaction from right across the spectrum on this budget, so stay tuned to Information Radio. You are listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, on the CBC Listen app and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. Stay with us. The World Report is next.
Today on Q, the Juno-winning musician Bahamas is back with a brand new album. The record's called My Second Last Album, which begs the question, really? You'll hear Aoife Yervinen, a.k.a. Bahamas, talk about whether or not he's thinking about wrapping things up as a musician.
Take me to the bridge and let me walk upon Q with Tom Power this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Today is the first of 4 days of debate on the new federal budget, and all that back and forth in the House of Commons will lead up to a critical confidence vote. But first this morning, caucus meetings, and they will feature one less Conservative and one more Liberal. Janice McGregor joins us now from the Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, how has the political math changed as a result of this budget?
Marcia, Chris D'Entremont appears to have timed his announcement to inflict maximum political damage, just as the budget was about to be read in the House of Commons, pulling the opposition leader out of his seat to deal with it and overshadowing, essentially drowning out anything else Conservatives had to say, critiquing the budget itself for the rest of the evening. When he crossed the floor, former caucus colleagues did not hold back their venom. Here's Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer speaking to As It Happens last night.
Mr. D'Entremont has looked at the massive amounts of debt and deficit that Mark Carney's telling Canadians they're going to have to sacrifice to pay off. And then I guess he put up his hand and said, sounds great to me.
Meanwhile, Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne more confident than ever that he's going to find the votes to pass this budget.
Members of Parliament in the opposition should think twice because it's not to me they need to respond, it's to the people, their constituent.
Liberals claim not to know this was coming. On his way into Cabinet in the morning, Government Whip Mark Garrettson told reporters he wasn't having conversations with anyone about moving to the government side. By the end of the day, he was welcoming a floor crosser into the fold.
So that is one vote sorted, 2 to go. What if no one else is willing to cross the floor?
Well, most eyes now are on the 7 New Democrats. This budget focuses pressure on several potential pain points for them. Could they really vote against billions in funding for new healthcare facilities? And there's a list in this budget of specific community infrastructure identified for funding, including a Filipino community center in interim leader Don Davies' riding, a theater in Heather McPherson's Edmonton riding, and the Inuit Nunagat University, which is potentially dear to the heart of Nunavut MP Lori Idlaut. Bright orange carrots hiding in plain sight right there in the budget book, should they need a reason to vote yes just this once.
Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. This new budget also clears up months of speculation about a proposed oil and gas emissions cap. As David Thurton reports, the Carney government is signaling it intends to eliminate that cap.
We won't need the cap anymore. So that's what we say in the budget. There's technologies, there's different regulations around methane, and we're talking also about carbon capture and sequestration.
From the sounds of it, Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne says the Liberal government will dump the oil and gas emissions cap. It's gone, but with some caveats.
There's a number of steps that need to happen, and when the conditions are met, we won't need the cap anymore, but the conditions would have to be met.
Won't need the cap because Liberals say the same emissions reductions could be achieved if methane regulations are finalized, carbon capture technology is deployed at scale, and carbon pricing is strengthened.
All while he raises the industrial carbon tax.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says that measure will make life more expensive.
A big tax increases on homes and food.
Big polluters, like cement and steel producers, pay the industrial carbon price, not consumers. But Poilievre argues it will get handed on to them. Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith, though, is reserving judgment as her province negotiates what it's calling a memorandum of understanding with the federal government. David Thornton, CBC News, Ottawa.
There are growing calls for EU nations to increase their air defenses. Drones flying near some airports in Europe are forcing them to shut down. Belgium's business airport is the latest to suspend its operations. It was closed for hours last night after several drone sightings. NATO says it is continuing extra aerial patrols along the alliance's eastern flank. The CBC's Briar Stewart is on board one of those surveillance aircrafts.
Take off.
A NATO surveillance aircraft departs from a base in western Germany bound for Polish skies. The plane has a large radar dome that allows the crew to see more than 500 kilometers in any direction. NATO launched this monitoring mission in September after around 20 Russian drones crossed into Polish airspace, with a number of them crashing. At the time, Russia said it hadn't been directly targeting anything in Poland.
We are here flying to deter, detect, and defend.
Captain Indy is a Canadian surveillance controller who's only being identified by his call sign and rank in line with NATO protocol.
Especially with the incursions a couple of months ago. So we want to make sure that we're able to see everything that's coming into NATO airspace.
And if necessary, to intercept them. But small, lightweight drones can be a challenge for the radar to pick up, which is why Europe wants to beef up its air defenses, especially after a number of airports have had to close in recent weeks. Jakob Kukogo is based in Brussels and is a senior fellow with the Peterson Institute.
There is a sort of element of whack-a-mole or hide and seek here. These drones, whoever launches them or for wherever they're launched, they don't linger.
The EU Commission has called the recent drone sightings near airports a type of hybrid warfare. And while most haven't pointed the finger directly at Russia, Belgium's defense minister said Tuesday's incidents were carried out by professionals intent on destabilizing the country. Briar Stewart, CBC News, in a NATO plane in Polish airspace.
U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs will face a crucial legal test today. The Supreme Court will hear arguments on the legality of Trump's decision to impose sweeping tariffs on almost every U.S. trading partner. The White House says it was forced to use the president's emergency powers due to ongoing security and economic threats. Harold Honjuko is a professor at Yale Law School. He says the Trump administration may have a difficult time proving the tariffs are the result of a crisis.
Many of the assertions made by Trump are ridiculous. For example, he says that these tariffs are necessary to stop the flow of fentanyl. He's complaining about the trade deficit, and that's existed for 40 years. And so it's a persistent problem, not an unusual and extraordinary threat that has suddenly arisen.
Several small businesses brought the case forward. They say the Trump administration violated the Constitution in bypassing Congress to initiate the new tariffs. It was a big night for Democrats in the U.S. The party was able to win some key elections, including new governors in Virginia and New Jersey. In California, voters approved Proposition 50. It allows the state to redraw its district maps. That is another boost for the Democrats heading into next year's midterm elections. But one of the biggest races of the night played out in New York City. Zoran Mamdani pulled in more than 50% of the vote to become the city's next mayor. Katie Nicholson has that story.
A triumphant end to a juggernaut of a campaign.
The working people of New York have been told by the wealthy and the well-connected that power does not belong in their hands.
Zoran Mamdani with a fiery speech.
Over the last 12 months, you have dared to reach for something greater. Tonight, against all odds, we have grasped it. The future is in our hands.
The 34-year-old Democratic socialist rapidly ascended to mayor-elect on promises to make life in New York more affordable. More than 2 million cast a ballot, the first time New York has seen that high a turnout since 1969. This race, seen by some as a barometer reading 1 year after voters elected Donald Trump to a second term in the Oval Office, and 1 year before the crucial midterm elections. Trump injected himself into the New York race. He endorsed former Governor Andrew Cuomo, a longtime Democrat, and suggested he would pull federal funding from the city if Mamdani won.
So Donald Trump, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up.
The New York results and other big Democratic wins seen by some Democrats and analysts as a repudiation of Trump's first 10 months in office. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Washington.
ABBA won the Eurovision contest with this song back in 1974. It launched the band's global career. The question now is, could a Canadian band be next? In case you missed it, the federal budget included an exciting little nugget yesterday. It said the government is working with CBC to explore Canada's participation in the International Song Contest. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You are listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, on the CBC Listen app and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Audrey Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up on the show during this hour, well, we're going to talk about the budget. Yes, as you heard, the Liberal government vowed to put forth a big, bold federal budget. Will it get enough support from opposition MPs to pass a confidence vote? More on that coming up after 6:30 here on the show. Also, more dollars and fewer items. We hear from some Manitobans about how much they're spending at the grocery store. But first up here, the workout supplement creatine is growing in popularity. You've likely heard of it if you've got a gym rat in the house. But does it work as well as wellness influencers claim. We're going to hear from Dr. Bardwaj coming right up. But first, at 6:11, let's head now to the CBC Manitoba News Centre and your morning headlines with Heather Wells. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew says he sees good and bad for this province in yesterday's federal budget. Ottawa's spending plan mentions the Port of Churchill several times. Kinew says an area of concern, though, is a lack of bilateral funding for healthcare, as one such agreement to pay for hospital and home care staff is set to expire next year. Kinew also wants to see more details of the budget's plan to spend more on agriculture at a time when producers are being hit by tariffs. Well, volunteers are already hard at it, packing holiday hampers at Winnipeg's Christmas Cheerboard. The charity started taking requests for holiday hampers yesterday. They've had hundreds of calls already, and the executive director expects up to 22,000 requests this year. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 6:30.
Thank you very much,
You're
Heather.
welcome.
Heather Wells with your local morning headlines. Let's say good morning to our crew here on the show. May McKillop is our show director, of course, standing by to take any of your commuter tips. Darren Morash behind the controls there for CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel, which we are streaming on live. And Abby Adeyemi is, of course, our tech. And keeping an eye on that forecast. And we're going to talk about this at some point, winter tires, because you're a car guy, Abby.
Yeah, I'm a
Are
car
you ready?
guy. I already booked it in like 6 months ago. I already locked myself in like 6 months ago. It's really so I'm not going to be part of the rush. So,
Okay.
but be prepared for it because you might get the white stuff on the ground tomorrow. Just saying. And for folks like me, I guess today, this evening might be one of those last set of days I would want to like really be outside in the elements because it's really going to get like below zero moving forward. But for today, it will be bright and cool across board. We're looking at sunshine dominating the southern part of the province, while up north we're going to see more like cloudy conditions and the flurries. Churchill already settling into the winter mode. Churchill is already getting like more snow as we speak at this time. Winnipeg, we are sitting between -5 and 1. So if you're like maybe in one part of the city and your device is telling you it's 1 degree at this time, and then you drive across town and it's -5. Yes, that's what will be happening in the city. We're sitting between that -5 and 1 degree this morning. Though it's clear outside. Did you catch the full moon last night? It's still going to be up there till 7 a.m. this morning. So take time out to just, soak it in. Plenty of sunshine in the forecast through the day. Light northwest winds, and we'll see temperatures get to about 6 degrees, still above seasonal for this time of the year. And across board from the Pembina Valley region, tracking it through Brandon and all the way to the Parkland and Interlake region, we're going to see lots of sunshine with highs between 6 and 7 in those regions. Up north, we're looking at cooler and few flurries, -5 and 1 degree also we will see up there, and lows will be in the range of -10. Along the Hudson Bay coast, Churchill, it's -9 this morning, and we're seeing light snow there with strong northwest winds making it really colder. But Winnipeg right now, -5 some places and 1 degree somewhere.
Oh, this is where the weather starts to turn. doesn't
Unsettled.
it? Yes, thank you very much, Abby. Abby Adeyemi there with a look at your forecast. Well, nothing to report commuter-wise so far this morning. But again, if you have something that's affecting your commute out there, give us a call. May McKillop standing by to take your tips, 204-788-3093. Quarter after 6 now. Well, there is a new supplement gaining popularity in the wellness world. And if you're an athlete or you follow fitness influencers, you've likely heard of it. It's called creatine. And while the marketing promises that it'll help unlock your energy and improve your performance, does it actually work? Our regular guide to health and medicine, Dr. Raj Bardwaj, is here to tell us more.
Good morning, Marjorie.
Let's start with the basics. What is creatine?
Yeah, so creatine or creatine phosphate is a protein that your body makes. It makes about 1 or 2 grams per day. You can also get creatine phosphate from eating protein, basically meat, in your diet. A pound of meat will get you, again, about 1 or 2 grams of creatine. And then you can also take it as a supplement, usually in the form of creatine monohydrate. The usual dose is about 3 to 5 grams per day. So what does it do in the body is super interesting. Creatine functions to help recharge a molecule called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. You probably learned about this in high school biology or chemistry and then promptly forgot it, which is fine. But ATP is the main energy currency that our cells use. And we spend ATP to run cellular processes, things like moving a muscle or, firing a neuron to think, things like that. And so when that happens, the ATP, the adenosine triphosphate, breaks down into adenosine diphosphate. So it loses a phosphate. And when you get low on ATP inside the cell, then your creatine phosphate donates its phosphate, turns ADP back into ATP really quickly. That's very efficient. And, the problem is that some people might not have optimal levels of a creatine phosphate sitting around in their muscles and in their brains and stuff. And you can imagine that might be, athletes, might be people avoiding meat, maybe even people who are pushed to their mental limits by things like sleep deprivation.
So why is this supplement getting so much hype right now?
Yeah, so once you understand what creatine does inside your cells, you can kind of see why it might be attractive as a supplement, right? There's this idea that if you've got a lot of creatine phosphate in your cells, then you might end up being a little stronger, a little faster if it's in your muscle cells, or you might be able to think a little faster, a little better if it's, there's plenty of creatine phosphate available in your brain. And there's been decades of research looking into creatine supplements for those exact effects. And, of course, the research has been around for a long time, but now, the wellness influencers on social media have been sort of finding some of those more recent studies and really hyping them up, and partly because I think, being cynical, I'm going to say a lot of those folks also sell or are somehow affiliated with different forms of creatine supplements that they sell, right? So pretty attractive claims, plus, the potential for some marketing. And, these claims appeal to our bias that if some is good for me, more must be better for me, right?
Yeah. So what does the evidence say about creatine's effects on muscle?
Yeah, so like I said, there's a lot of research on it. So we have to sort of zoom out, look at the big picture, and sort of look at the real life effects. So, on the one hand, you have some studies that show, for example, weightlifters who are doing weight exercises plus using creatine supplements end up with bigger, stronger muscles than people who just do the weight exercises and are given placebo. And, how much stronger? A bit stronger, maybe about 10% at most. And that's mainly useful for high intensity, short duration activities. So, 10%, that sounds pretty impressive. So I thought, gosh, this must be banned for Olympic athletes who are training, right? So I looked it up, and the World Anti-Doping Association, WADA, actually does not ban creatine because they have 3 criteria for if a substance is prohibited, right? It has to have the potential to enhance sport performance. It has to represent a health risk to the athlete, and it has to violate the spirit of the sport. If it crosses any of those 2, then it's out. But the World Anti-Doping Association says creatine does not satisfy any of the 3 criteria because they say it's not considered sufficiently performance enhancing. So, and we're talking about athletes where if they get even a tiny increase in speed or strength, that can mean the difference between going home with a gold medal or going home empty-handed. So, the real world effects for non-Olympic athletes are probably not significant if WADA doesn't even think they're significant for Olympic athletes. But, there are some studies that suggest that creatine might reduce muscle soreness, might improve recovery time between days of intense exercise. But, probably relatively small real world effects for me and you.
What about the potential on brain effects?
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting, actually, especially you consider that your brain, even though it only weighs about 2% of your body, it uses about 20% of your body's ATP. So we'll look at a couple of studies here. So in 2007, There was a study that showed that vegetarians who took a supplement of 5 grams of creatine monohydrate for 6 weeks ended up with better working memory and processing speed than people who didn't take the supplement. There was a more recent study that was bigger. They looked at 123 people taking 5 grams of creatine or a placebo, again over 6 weeks. And the researchers found, there's an inkling of a benefit here, but when we run the stats, it's not significant. There's no significant difference, even in vegetarians. But then the researchers said that bigger and longer studies should be done looking at this more carefully. And then another paper that was published just last year really caught the attention of a lot of social media influencers. This study just took 15 people. Okay, it made them not sleep for one night and then gave them either creatine or placebo, and then tested their reaction time and their memory and their thinking. And thinking was that if maybe when you're stressed out, when your brain is stressed by not sleeping, it becomes deficient of creatine phosphate. And if we give those people a really big dose, like 20, 30 grams of creatine, then they'll do better. And they did. So that's kind of interesting. And that shows some promise for creatine in some circumstances to help with brain function. And now there's a lot more research that's still ongoing, people with Alzheimer's, people who've had concussions, even some studies looking at people doing mental health therapy, so cognitive behavioral therapy, either with creatine or with a placebo. And it seems that they get a bigger bang for their therapy buck if they're also on creatine. Now, it hasn't been tested against antidepressants or anything like that, but still lots of promising early research.
So what's your advice then, Dr. Bardwash, for anyone who is already taking creatine or thinking about it?
Yeah, I think that there's certainly some potential for creatine to be a useful supplement for some people in certain circumstances, right? So think vegetarians, think, people who are really working to build a lot of muscle, or maybe, and this is stretching it, but, the idea is that maybe if we take creatine, we won't lose muscle as fast as we age. But the thing here is that creatine doesn't do the work for you. Right? You still have to go and do the exercises and lift the weights. It's not going to do it. It's not going to build muscle if you don't sort of, give it the impetus to. For people who are sleep deprived, like shift workers like me, it looks like big doses of creatine, like 5 or 6 times the usual recommended dose, might speed brain processing for a few hours at least. So again, lots of promise there. But with any supplement, there can be side effects. And, creatine's quite safe. The most common side effects are bloating, feeling gassy, gaining some water weight, and of course, the side effect on your wallet. But, for people with kidney problems, with heart disease, the excess water that they absorbed with the creatine, that might be enough to get them into some trouble. But for most people, that water absorption is going to be more annoying than dangerous. So, it's one of those things where I say, look, creatine is pretty safe. It's pretty well studied. It's not a simple answer to complex problems like dementia or aging or even building stronger muscles necessarily. But this is one to keep an eye on for sure.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for this, Dr. Bardwash.
My pleasure.
That was our house doctor, Dr. Raj Bardwash.
Marketing contests are great until they go sideways, like the one to name a BC ferry that sank in an ocean of ridicule, and the department store contest that sent Pitbull packing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or the salacious vote to name an Indiana Civic Center after a politician. Marketing contests on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly, Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen.
6:24 now. It is -5 and clear in Winnipeg, and there's a wind chill. Feels like -10 out there. Chilly start to the day. On our way to a high of 6 degrees under a mainly sunny sky. But here's something that might warm you up on this chilly morning. There's nothing like warming up with a comforting beverage. And in the fall, one drink reigns supreme: the pumpkin spice latte. But how did this gorgeous flavor become a staple on coffee shop menus? That's in the next installment of Fall Queries with Chloe.
It's called Canada Strong, budget 20.
Pumpkin spice latte for Chloe. I'll admit, that's a phrase I'm
fairly used to hearing in the fall. But as I sip my PSL, it makes me wonder, why are so many people, including me, obsessed with this flavor?
So pumpkin spice is a cultural marker of seasonal transition for many.
Sonia Bookman is the department head of sociology and criminology at the University of Manitoba. She wrote a chapter all about pumpkin spice for the second edition of the textbook, Seasonal Sociology.
Well, the first pumpkin pie recipe was published by Amelia Simmons in the late 1700s. And since then, pumpkin pie has remained relatively similar. And the flavors of pumpkin spice include some combination of cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, cloves, and allspice. The flavor and aroma of pumpkin spice is popular mainly because it invokes a nostalgia for fall traditions and festivals, which are also social events that connect us with family or friends. So experiences like eating pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving, or carving pumpkins at Halloween, or visiting a pumpkin patch in childhood. The pumpkin spice industry, though, that we know today, however, really only took off when Starbucks adapted the flavors of pumpkin spice to a portable luxury coffee drink. So for many consumers for whom getting coffee is part of the daily routine, pumpkin spice lattes are now part of their fall ritual. But it also spurred a whole pumpkin spice season that has been commercialized. So where in fall you can get pumpkin spice scented candles, soap, or even pumpkin spice flavored Cheerios when you shop for groceries. I've got pumpkin spice flavored candles. I do like pumpkin spice latte occasionally. I've tried the pumpkin spice Cheerios. They're not bad. I will draw the line though at pumpkin spice. I believe there's pumpkin spice Spam or some kind of related version of that.
I love pumpkin. I did try those pumpkin spice Cheerios. They are pretty good. Sonia Bookman is the department head of sociology and criminology at the University of Manitoba and the author of Pumpkin Spice Lattes, Marking the Seasons, with brands featured in the second edition of Seasonal Sociology. And another fun fact, although some coffee shops may create their own pumpkin syrup, pumpkin spice does not contain any pumpkin.
I got no home, I gotta get one. I've been killing so much time from the get-go. I got no show, I gotta get on. I've been wasting so much time, don't you know?
That is Aiden Bello, otherwise known as His with Get Go. Well, still ahead here, the new Liberal government tabled its highly anticipated federal budget yesterday. A mix of new spending offset by cuts in savings. We're going to hear more about the fiscal plan coming up here on Information Radio. Stay with us. Your CBC local news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it's cold out at the airport, -5 right now. In downtown Winnipeg, though, it is 1 degree, mostly sunny today. That bit of a northwest breeze is going to ease back by about noon today, and still warmer than seasonal for one more day, a high of 6. Well, today is the first of 4 days of debate on the new federal budget. And all that back and forth in the House of Commons will lead to a critical confidence vote. But first thing this morning, caucus meetings. And those meetings will feature one less Conservative and one more Liberal. Nova Scotia MP Chris D'Autremont resigned from the Conservatives, crossing the floor to join the Liberals. He says he considers the Liberals' fiscal plan a better path forward for his riding and for the country. Now, Manitoba's premier sees positives for the province in yesterday's federal budget. Wab Kinew says mentions of the Port of Churchill in Ottawa's spending plan are good for this province.
Which gives us another sign of momentum that we're going to build this big nation-building project here in Manitoba. And to put a finer point on it, there's an icebreaker on the cover of their budget document. So come on, send one of those over here to Manitoba.
The budget says the Major Projects Office will work to expand export capacity in the north through Hudson Bay. It's not, however, one of the country's first major nation-building projects. There is spending to support the Hudson Bay Railway and the Port of Churchill, but that money had been previously announced. Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham welcomes the infrastructure spending in the federal budget. The Liberal government is earmarking $51 billion over 10 years for infrastructure projects. Gillingham says Winnipeg needs a chunk of that money for Phase 3 upgrades at the North End sewage treatment plant.
It's so critical to the future of Winnipeg. It's critical to us being able to add more housing at a time when we need more housing. And it's critical to our future's economy because there's a capacity issue there. For us to open up Winnipeg's economy in the future, we need to get that third phase built.
The cost of the project is pegged at around $3 billion. That spending on infrastructure is also being welcomed by the Manitoba Heavy Construction Association. Vice President Felicia Wiltshire says the construction industry is glad Ottawa is putting such an emphasis on infrastructure.
We're pleased to see that the government is recognizing that building infrastructure is really going to help grow the Canadian economy. But I think like everybody else, we're going to wait to see what the details are, what exactly they're going to be investing in, where those funds are going, and then how much is available for Manitoba.
And you can hear more of those budget details and more reaction to it coming up on World Report at 7. Bracing for an onslaught of holiday requests. Volunteers packing hampers with crackers, pasta, and canned goods at Winnipeg's Christmas Cheerboard. The charity started taking requests for holiday hampers yesterday. They've already had hundreds of calls. Shauna Bell is the Cheerboard's executive director, and she expects up to 22,000 requests this year.
The demand is exceptionally high, and we don't anticipate it getting any less this year. So we're going to try and accommodate every single one of those requests that come through.
Last year, they prepared 21,000 hampers. Bell says soaring food prices are making it even more challenging this year. A Winnipeg veterinarian with a prior disciplinary history has been punished again by Manitoba's regulatory body for veterinarians. This time, he's been ordered to end his practice by June of next year. Dr. Wen Chao Zheng operates Animal Hospital of Manitoba on Main Street. He was subject to 4 complaints at a hearing of the Manitoba Veterinary Medical Association. Noelle McIver filed one of the complaints after Zheng made an error in surgery on her cat, which later led to the cat's leg needing to be amputated by a different veterinarian.
They need to be holding their doctors at a higher level, a higher standard than other people. And they say in their profile that they're there for the animals, for their welfare. Then prove it.
Zheng says he is ready to retire from practice and feels he's being treated unfairly by the regulatory body. Well, a late night in Los Angeles and not a single goal to show for it. The Winnipeg Jets were blanked by the Kings 3-0 last night. Coach Scott Arniel says he was trying to ease captain Adam Lowry back into action after missing the first 12 games of the season, recovering from off-season hip surgery. As for the rest of the team, Arniel says LA kept them in check.
They did a pretty good job of keeping us, keeping us on our heels. And I thought tonight this was one of those games offensively where we didn't do enough to win the hockey game.
Connor Hellebuck with 23 saves last night. Next up, the Jets stay in California to face San Jose tomorrow night, and that is another late one with a start of 9 p.m. You can find more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
I went to bed early because I had to do the morning show, Heather.
Yes.
And I didn't watch any of that game. I guess that's a good thing.
You didn't miss any highlights. No, not at all.
But hopefully we'll turn this around and get a win in San Jose, which is coming up next.
Have faith.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather Wells there with your CBC Local News. It is 6:35 and you're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg on the CBC Listen app and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, let's turn our attention now to the weather because there is a lot to talk about. Isn't there, Abby?
Yes, it's going to be a bright and cool day across board with plenty of sunshine on its way. So maybe this is that day you want to grab your sunglasses. Though we still have light snow already falling in the northern part of the province. Winnipeg right now, we're looking at -5 at the airport and 1 degree at the Forks. It's clear outside. Sunshine on its way. It's going to be sunny through the day with light northwest winds. And we'll see highs around 6 degrees and some clouds will build overnight. We drop to -4 and we get to see some rain overnight, and that will turn to wet snow.
No reaction right there.
I was like,
I'm speechless.
Wet snow. Okay. Similar conditions we're seeing in Pembina Valley region. 1 degree at this time, heading to a high of 7 degrees. Also, a mix of rain and snow arrives tomorrow. Brandon is at -6, warming up to 5. Sunny day ahead. Dauphin is at -4 and Clare. Also going to be sunny day, warming to 5. Gimli, -1. It's going to be a sunny day. You warm up to 5 degrees. The Power Flim Flam, we're looking at -1 at this time. A slim chance of flurries this morning. You're going to stay around 1 degree for the rest of the day. Thompson, -9 and clear. Sunny day also, you drop to -13 and it's going to be chilly tomorrow. Churchill, you're at -9, light snow there, strong northwest winds, and your temperature falls to -11 this afternoon, staying near -14 overnight. So it's happening, Marjorie. That change, it's like goodbye fall.
I got to look for the winter jacket tonight. I'm going to do that.
I think so.
Yeah.
And then the gloves.
Yes. Thank you very much, Abby.
You're welcome.
Abby there with a look at your forecast. So far, no traffic, no commuter notes. Hopefully everything's going smoothly if you are making your way to work, school, wherever you're headed right now. But if there are any traffic commuter issues, give us a call, 204-788-3093. Coming up now to 6:38. Hallie Cottenham joins us now with a look at the business report. Good morning, Hallie.
Good morning, Marjorie.
Of course, the big talk about here is the budget. After the Liberal caucus meeting today, MPs are going to fan out across the country to try and sell yesterday's budget to their constituents. Of course, we're going to have coverage coming up here on Information Radio. But remind listeners, what were the key takeaways?
$141 billion in new spending over the next 5 years, Marjorie, offset by $60 billion in cuts and savings, including reducing the public service by 40,000 jobs over 5 years. There's $51 billion for major infrastructure projects. Heather mentioned some of these on her local cast. Think roads, ports, hospitals, housing, community centres, parks and transit. And $81 billion set aside to strengthen the Canadian Armed Forces with a beefed up Buy Canadian procurement plan. There's something called a productivity super deduction, which might interest folks who were following along with interest in tax changes. This is going to allow businesses to write off more of their expenses to buy equipment and technology. And the idea with this super deduction is to attract investment, both domestic and foreign. Interestingly, it's going to make Canada's marginal effective tax rate for corporations the lowest in the G7. Other headlines out of the budget, immigration, a reduction by half of the number of temporary residents, such as students and foreign workers. And there's a plan to do away with the proposed Trudeau-era emissions cap, which should please the oil patch.
Okay, Hallie, this document, 400 pages long, not to mention the digital-only annexes. What might Canadians have missed?
It's interesting because our colleague Elizabeth Thompson was tasked with sifting through the fine print, and she found some tidbits of interest. An item in the budget would oblige banks to give public notice ahead of any branch closures. Now, this is particularly hard on small or rural communities. So this change would prohibit banks from charging fees for clients who want to transfer out of these doomed branches. Another item, solving issues around long-term care costs for veterans, some of whom have been overcharged for years because of some confusion about how to calculate their room and board. So the budget clarifies the rules and sets out to fix the miscalculations retroactively, which should interest some folks. The budget also gives Canada Post the right to set its own rates. So in the past, rate increases had to be approved by Cabinet and only after consultation. So this deregulation essentially might be part of the solution for the corporation's money woes, but don't expect the price of stamps or the price of shipping packages to go down anytime soon. Bottom line, Marjorie, this fiscal blueprint all adds up to a deficit of $78 billion, which has, some folks in the opposition upset, but it is actually on the low end of what some economists had predicted. The minority Liberals, though, still need 2 votes to pass the budget, albeit one fewer than before that Nova Scotia Conservative crossed the floor. But this budget, designed to prop up an economy really beset by the tariff war.
And on that note, Hallie, a big day in Washington.
Yeah, the U.S. Supreme Court will hear arguments today about whether President Trump's sweeping tariffs are constitutional. The arguments are going to focus on Trump's use of the emergency economic powers by declaring a national emergency. And that includes tariffs against Canada that cite the fentanyl crisis. Trump is calling this hearing one of the most important in the history of the country. And meanwhile, today marks the 36th day of the ongoing U.S. government shutdown, officially making it the lengthiest in history.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Hallie.
I hope your listeners like talking budgets, Marjorie, because it's wall to wall today across most of our platforms.
It is. We have plenty of coverage coming up. Thank you very much, Hallie.
Take care, Marjorie.
You too. Hallie Cottenham with the Business News. Many of us will be familiar with this voice.
He looks at her. He says, Elizabeth, Elizabeth, your hair is all dirty. Your clothes are all messed up. You don't have any shoes on, and you smell like a dragon's ear. Come back and rescue me when you're dressed like a real princess. Elizabeth says, Ronald, Ronald, your hair is all nice. Your clothes are all pretty. You look like a nice guy, Ronald, but you know what? You are a bum. And they didn't get married after all.
That is beloved children's author Robert Munsch reading his story, The Paper Bag Princess, for CBC a few years ago. His books have been read by children all around the world. And now, many of his personal documents will be shared with the Guelph Public Library to be added to their archives. Eleni Hughes is the supervisor of archives and records management at the library and explains what this donation means to them.
We are very excited. I mean, as most people know, Robert Munsch is internationally renowned children's author, and he has been a member of the Guelph community for more than 50 years. So he's an integral part of both the city of Guelph and also, children's literature and the development of literacy and for kids at a young age. So he's a beloved local author, and so we're more than happy to have his personal archives come into the Guelph Public Library. This conversation has been going on for quite a few years now. The Munsch family has always been quite supportive of the library, and they've been involved with the library, and so we were able to make sure that they knew the advantages of having his personal archives at the Guelph Public Library. We're now moving into a new facility where we have the space and proper storage area for preserving archives. We're looking at a lot of like the original drafts of the stories, notes from publishers, possibly some fan letters, photographs. You're looking at sort of like sharing the story of the author himself as well as the stories behind the stories.
Now, the library does not have the documents yet, but will work with the family to determine what will be included in the archive. Eleni says it comes at a really exciting time for the library as it gets set to open its new central branch. But on a personal level, as someone who works in archives, Eleni says Munch's documents will be a huge resource for the community.
I was just very excited to meet him, and the family is wonderful. And I think we've all been touched by his stories. So I think for me, it's just exciting to see the stories that he tells about all the characters that he's written about. And for me, it will be exciting for us to sort of think about how we want to display certain items and hope that it will sort of be a draw for classes and for community members and for members all over to be able to come and we can sort of, see this exhibit that hopefully we'll be able to create. It's exciting for us because we will be moving into a new space, a new central library. We'll actually be opening up an archives area, a reading room, a showcase area. So for us, it's going to be, we hope that we'll have some of these items on display, and it will be nice to sort of entice community members to come in and see not just this great exhibit, but also just the whole new public library.
That is Eleni Hughes, the Supervisor of Archives and Records Management at the Guelph Public Library. The library has signed an agreement with Robert Munch and his family to house an archive of his personal documents, which will include original drafts of his stories, notes from publishers, fan letters, photographs, published works in various forms and formats, and more. It will be part of the library's new central branch. The library is expected to open in fall 2026, and the collection will be on display to the public starting in 2027. You may also recall Munch made headlines earlier this year for an interview he gave to the New York Times in which he said he has been approved medically assisted death, also known as MAID. That comes after he was previously diagnosed with dementia and Parkinson's disease. However, his family has stressed that this is not happening anytime soon. 6:47. Winnipeg-based Ariel Posen, hailed as a modern-day guitar hero by Rolling Stone, delivers his rootsy, soulful sound with Downtown, a mix of electrified Americana, blues, and heartland rock. Here is Ariel Posen now with Downtown.
City lights don't shine as bright as they used to. And the streets don't feel the same as when they were new. Feeling visible in a crowd, fall asleep to the sound. I'm never gonna drown it out. Every time I'm back, I'm reminded that love lives downtown in my heart. Two more stars on the train line to 4th Avenue. Where I first broke down, got lost, but then I found you. And even though it's dark at night, you can see it in a different light. Every time I'm back, I'm reminded that love lives downtown in my heart. Every day it changes, it doesn't know what my name is, but love lives downtown chest is all I've got left. But it's harder to leave now, 'cause love is
That is Ariel Posen with Downtown. 10 minutes now to 7 o'clock, -5. Clear in Winnipeg. Wind west-northwest at 13. Wind chill, though, feels like -10. Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne unveiled the new Liberal government's federal budget yesterday, the first under Prime Minister Mark Carney. The Liberals vowed it would be a big, bold fiscal plan. It's all laid out in a 406-page document detailing billions in proposed spending and cuts. Federal opposition leader Pierre Poilievre was not impressed.
Our party wanted an affordable budget for an affordable life. And on behalf of all the Canadians who can no longer afford to eat, heat, or house themselves because of Liberal inflation, we Conservatives cannot support this costly Liberal budget.
For more on this story, we've reached Jonathan Malloy. He's a professor in the Department of Political Science at Carleton University. Good morning. Thank you for joining us, Jonathan.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
The Liberals billed this budget to Canadians heading into its unveiling as big and bold. In your view, does this budget live up to its billing?
Well, I think we won't know for a few years. It's a very aspirational budget. It wants to, as Mr. Carney's been saying all along, move the Canadian economy in new directions. It commits a lot of new spending in new areas. But the effect we won't know for years. So he called it a generational budget, but we won't know, I guess, for a generation whether it actually was.
So where are they targeting new spending here?
Well, there's two big areas, both of which we knew were coming. One is defense. A lot of new money in defense spending, which, of course, reacts to the pressures from the Trump administration. But a little vague exactly where the money's all going, but $81 billion over 5 years. And then the rest, a lot of money is also going to infrastructure spending. Again, the big projects that the government's always talking about port facilities, new rail lines, bridges, that sort of thing there, all to increase economic activity. So there's a lot of both new spending and also a lot of new tax breaks and things to encourage private companies to step up in those directions. And that's where almost all the big new spending is, in those sort of defense and capital spending areas. Very little spending in new programs for Canadians. It's more cutbacks than new things for Canadians.
Prime Minister Carney also made clear that this budget, that there would be sacrifices for Canadians. What kind of sacrifices does this fiscal plan lay out?
Well, certainly the big one is cuts in the federal public service, which again we knew were coming. There's a commitment to cutting about 40,000 jobs in the federal public service, which is over 10%. A lot of those might be by attrition. Again, not a lot of details exactly where the cuts are, but that's really significant both for public servants and also for services being delivered to Canadians there. But beyond that, I mean, there's not a lot of really big program cuts. There's been cutbacks in a lot of areas, but relatively small cutbacks, frankly, compared to what we were expecting. Not a lot of big complete cuts and cancellations in a way that we've seen in other past austerity budgets. So there are sacrifices, but not as dramatic as some might have expected.
There was also talk about generational investment as well as sacrifices. What does it say about how long Canadians will have to make sacrifices or wait to see a return on these generational investments?
Well, I mean, this is a long-term budget. So as I said earlier, we won't know for years, what the actual effect is. And of course, underlying all this is the Trump administration. So much of this is driven by the events in the United States and trying to reorient our trade economy away from the United States. So we don't, a lot of it depends on what happens down south. And also, as I said, the investments are all in infrastructure, so ports, carbon capture, things like that, which are then designed to increase economic activity by businesses themselves. So it's a long-term vision. So it might be 5, 10 years, even more, before we really know what the effects are.
Jonathan, how closely does this fiscal plan line up with the platform that the Liberals campaigned on this past spring?
Well, it's fairly consistent. There's certainly some things that were mentioned in the election that didn't happen now, and things you announced yesterday that weren't talked about in the election. But the tone is very clear. Since Mr. Carney became Prime Minister now about 7 months ago, he's always talked about going in a new economic direction and really focusing on economic growth rather than social spending and programs, which is what Justin Trudeau's government was largely about. So, certainly in terms of the overall tone of Mr. Carney since he became Prime Minister, it's pretty consistent.
This federal budget is a confidence vote, and as a minority government, the Liberals don't have the votes to pass it themselves. How are the opposition parties responding to this budget?
Well, indeed, Mr. Poilievre and Conservatives will be opposing it. That's not a big surprise. The Bloc Québécois is also probably going to be opposing it, although they can be unpredictable. It really comes down to the NDP because the Liberals are 2 seats short of a majority, so they need some extra votes. The NDP has 7, but the NDP has been talking about abstaining from the vote entirely. I think because they do not want to bring down the government. They don't want to force an election. And so it really comes down to the NDP. As I said, the signals from the NDP are that even though there's big job cuts in this budget, they're not willing to bring down the government. So they'll probably abstain and the budget will get through. Finally,
Jonathan, I want to ask you, what will you be watching in the days and weeks to come?
Well, one certainly is the NDP, as I said. Until it actually happens, we don't know for sure what they're going to do. But more broadly, I think it's the details of this, both the details of the spending, in defense areas. We don't really know exactly where it's going. And I think things like the public service cuts, how are they actually going to happen? It's supposed to be by attrition, and it's going to be an impact. So people are going to lose their jobs. The big question is whether there's going to be some changes in processes and things as well. More automation, for example, that means that actual service levels of Canadians are not affected as much. So hopefully there unfortunately have to be cuts. Hopefully they're smart cuts that minimize the impact on services and on people themselves.
Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us this morning here on the show.
Well, thank you.
Jonathan Malloy is a professor in the Department of Political Science at Carleton University. Coming up now to 6:57, let's check in with Heather Wells and a look at your headlines. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's premier sees positives for this province in yesterday's federal budget. Wab Kinew says mentions of the Port of Churchill in Ottawa's spending plan are good for the province. However, Kinew says he would like to see more details of the government's plans to spend on agriculture at a time when producers are being hit by tariffs. Volunteers are already at it, packing holiday hampers at Winnipeg's Christmas Cheer Board. The charity started taking requests for hampers yesterday and have already had hundreds of calls. Executive Director Shauna Bell expects up to 22,000 requests this year. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 7:30.
Thank you very much, Heather. We're under a clear sky in Winnipeg right now, -5 with the wind chill feels like -10 right now. On our way to a high of 6 degrees under a mainly sunny sky. No traffic tips to pass along. But again, if you're seeing something out there, 204-788-3093. Well, still ahead here in the next hour. Officials in southern Manitoba say they were disturbed after hanging dolls depicting local politicians were put up on Halloween.
It's usually we get emails and phone calls, but never something that graphic.
That was Yvonne Normando-Reeve of La Broquerie. We're going to be talking about anti-authority extremism coming up here in the next hour of the show. You are listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg. Everywhere on the CBC Listen app and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. We have plenty coming up in the next hour of the show, but stay tuned here to CBC Radio 1. Coming up next, World Report.
Today on The Current.
When I talk about establishing trust, the scout has to trust that he or she is making the correct pick.
I'm Pia Chattopadhyay. Hockey scouts travel around our country looking for the best players in the nation. And they're full of stories about the excitement of putting together winning teams. The life of a hockey scout coming up on The Current.
The Current, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young.
The cost of this Liberal budget will drive up the cost of food, housing, and everything else that Canadians buy.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says he cannot support the budget tabled yesterday, but former Conservative MP Chris D'Entremont says he can, and to do it, he will cross the floor. That means the Liberals need the support of just 2 more opposition MPs for the budget to pass. But as Peter Armstrong reports, in this economy, passing the budget could be the easy part.
Mr. Speaker, the budget I present today comes at a time of profound change.
In the House of Commons, Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne lays out the plan his government has crafted to help the economy not just survive the tariff crisis, but to thrive in spite of it. Businesses are being asked to bet big on the Liberal promise to get Canadian products to market. David McDonald, senior economist from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, says the feds are making a bold promise about the road ahead.
It's that we will rise relatively quickly from the ashes of 2 quarters of chaos. It's not clear to me that the chaos ends and that the impact on Canada ends anytime soon.
The budget is meant to buy time for these measures to be implemented and take shape, but the damage being done to the economy is happening in real time. Sahir Khan, vice president of the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy at the University of Ottawa, says the clock is ticking.
And I don't think these measures are really going to kick in the short term. I think it's about confidence in the short term, but the results of a major capital strategy and defense strategy are going to be felt over decades.
And therein lies the hard part. Can the economy keep its head above water long enough for the budget and its changes to start playing out? Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
Prime Minister Mark Carney's first budget delivers a historic investment in defense and the defense industry, nearly $82 billion. The CBC's Murray Brewster breaks down the numbers for us.
I have even more good news, Mr. Speaker.
Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne.
We will meet our 2% NATO commitment this year. We will modernize NORAD. We will reinforce our Arctic defense.
The Liberal government has set aside an additional $81.8 billion over 5 years to rearm the Canadian military. But the new federal budget offers only a vague, big-picture view on how the money will be spent. It also does not spell out in precise detail the politically important pathway to meeting NATO's defense spending target of 5% of the gross domestic product. Defense expert Dave Perry says, given the build-up, he was expecting more clarity.
But it's really kind of curious to me that a government that has made so much of wanting to commit to NATO targets has really only provided a bookend. They say we're going to be at 2% this year, and 10 years from now we'll be at 3.5%. Where it sits between this year and 10 years from now is completely unclear.
There is more money, billions for recruiting, training, new equipment, defense infrastructure, and beefing up cyber defense capabilities. In addition, $6 billion is set aside to build up Canada's defense industry, and the government is introducing a Buy Canada policy. How that affects the Defense Department, which has billions of dollars in equipment on order from the U.S., is unclear. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs face a crucial test today. The U.S. Supreme Court will begin hearing arguments on whether Trump has the legal authority to impose sweeping tariffs. The White House argues the tariffs are in response to various emergencies threatening the country's security and economy. Mike Crawley has more from Washington.
One of the most important decisions in the history of our country.
U.S. President Donald Trump showing just how badly he wants to win this case. At stake, billions of dollars worth of tariffs he's imposed on imports from dozens of countries, including Canada.
Without tariffs, our country would be in great jeopardy.
The case before the Supreme Court does not address the tariffs Trump has levied on specific sectors, such as steel, aluminum, autos, and softwood lumber. Instead, it's focused on Trump's use of an economic emergency law to hit countries with broad-based tariffs over cross-border fentanyl trafficking and long-running trade deficits.
He's saying that this is an emergency
It has to be dealt with by this crisis power.
Harold Hongju Ko is a professor at Yale Law School.
Many of the assertions made by Trump are ridiculous. For example, he says that these tariffs are necessary to stop the flow of fentanyl. He's complaining about the trade deficit, and that's existed for 40 years. And so it's a persistent problem, not an unusual and extraordinary threat that has suddenly arisen.
The case was brought by small businesses who say the president violated the Constitution with his tariff regime. The lower court rulings all went against the administration. In a social media post Tuesday evening, Trump described the case as, quote, literally life or death for our country. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Washington.
New York City has elected Zoran Mamdani as its new mayor. Mamdani is the city's first Muslim mayor, and he is the youngest person to be elected to the position since 1892. The 34-year-old immigrated from Uganda. Mamdani ran on a platform of making New York more affordable and livable. He also pushed his agenda of putting political power back into the hands of the people.
For as long as we can remember, the working people of New York have been told by the wealthy and the well-connected that power does not belong in their hands. Tonight, against all odds, we have grasped it. My friends, we have toppled a political dynasty.
Mamdani beat out former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Cuomo was being endorsed by U.S. President Donald Trump. Also in the race was Republican talk show host Curtis Sliwa. Mamdani received more than 50% of the vote. He will be sworn in on January 1st. Israel's military says the remains of another hostage in Gaza has been returned. Israel Defense Forces say 19-year-old Staff Sergeant Itay Chen was abducted by Hamas on October 7th after he fell from a tank. His death was confirmed in March of 2024. In return, hospital officials in Gaza say they have received the bodies of 15 Palestinians from Israel. The return of these remains is seen as a sign of progress in the fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The U.S. brokered agreement has been in place since October 10th. A curfew and nationwide internet blackout have been partially lifted in Tanzania. The East African nation has been at the center of violent protests for days after the re-election of the first woman president. Demonstrators are disputing the election results, citing intimidation, harassment, and even abductions. Human rights groups say up to 1,000 people have been killed in the resulting police crackdowns. The CBC's Anna Cunningham has more.
Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan sworn in for a second term Monday. The Electoral Commission says she won 98% of the vote. Tanzania's opposition calls the election a sham. Her party has held power since independence from the UK in 1961. But human rights groups have raised concerns about the legitimacy of this vote. African election watchers say they were unable to independently observe the election. Last Wednesday, as polls opened, protesters were seen pulling down Hassan's campaign signs. Roadblocks were set on fire, footage seemingly showing bloodied and injured demonstrators as security forces were filmed patrolling streets with batons and live rounds. What happened remains difficult to independently verify. The internet was cut off.
There's going to be resistance,
says Tito Magoti, a Tanzanian human rights lawyer.
How can you lead the people that believe that you sent troops to kill their loved ones?
Magoti says. In a joint statement released before Hassan's inauguration, Foreign Minister Anita Anand, with her British and Norwegian counterparts, says there are credible reports of a large number of fatalities. Tanzania's government says the opposition has hugely exaggerated numbers. As the internet is slowly restored, Tanzanian police are warning people it's a criminal offence to share graphic images online. Anna Cunningham, CBC News, London.
In Paris, fast fashion is colliding with the French façon de vivre. Protesters are gathering outside the Paris department store BHV. Shein,
is going to open its first physical store there this morning. And the Chinese online retailer is facing major pushback from other designers who say Shein's business practices will put them out of work, from human rights advocates who say Shein exploits its workers, and from French prosecutors who are investigating a report Shein's platform was selling childlike sex dolls. The company is promising to fully cooperate with authorities. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, on the CBC Listen app, and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up on this hour of the show, inflation continues to pinch consumers in the wallet. We hear how that's affecting what Manitobans are putting into their grocery cart. That's coming up after 7:30. Also, a longtime advocate for those experiencing homelessness says the city's new encampment restrictions will negatively impact people who sleep outdoors. She argues displacement is not the answer, but managed encampment sites could be. We'll hear more coming up. But first up here, a researcher of anti-authority extremism in Canada says he's not surprised after learning about the recent display depicting local politicians hanging by a noose. He'll tell us why coming right up. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. At 7:11 with your morning headlines, here is Heather Wells. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew sees good and bad for the province in yesterday's federal budget. Ottawa's spending plan mentions the Port of Churchill several times. Kinew says an area of concern, though, is the lack of a bilateral funding arrangement for health care, as one such agreement to pay for hospital and home care staff is set to expire next year. A Winnipeg veterinarian's been ordered to stop his veterinarian practice at the end of next June. The decision against Dr. Wenxiao Zheng follows a regulatory hearing by the Manitoba Veterinary Medical Association. It dealt with 4 complaints against the doctor. We're going to hear more in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
Thank you very much, Heather. Heather Wells with your CBC local news headlines. Let's turn our attention now to the forecast because Abby has a lot to tell you.
We are in for a bright and cool day across the province today. Sunshine will dominate the southern part of the province, while up north we're going to be seeing flurries and already that light snow falling in Churchill at this time. Warm spots in the province. Victoria Beach, 3.7%. It's a beach day, actually. Nope, it's not. Winnipeg right now sitting between -5 and -1, depending on where you are in the city. Clear there. The sun about to make its appearance. We're looking out for plenty of sunshine through the day, light northwest winds, and we warm up to about 6 degrees. While across the south, the Pembina Valley is around 0. Westman region, we're seeing -7 there. The Parkland -4. The Interlake, we're seeing -1 there. So it's going to be sunny across board. And most of those regions will warm up to about 6 degrees. While up north, we're looking at -3s around the Par and Flin Flon. Thompson is at -10 this morning. Churchill -9 with light snow falling at this time. Winnipeg, we are just in between, so you can pick your spot, -5 or +1.
I picked the +1. Thanks, Abby. Abby Adiyemi with your weather forecast. And, of course, good morning to the rest of our crew here on the show. May McKillop is our show director. And Darren Morash is behind the controls there running our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Traffic-wise, nothing to report. It's been quiet so far on the commuter line, but if you're seeing anything out there that might be affecting your route, your commute, give us a call on the commuter line 204-788-3093. People in the RM of Taché called it a disturbing display depicting politicians being hanged by a noose. It has now been taken down, but some wonder why it was ever set up in the first place. The display was first discovered on a property on Halloween night. It showed 5 life-sized figures hanging from what appeared to be a gallows. 4 of the 5 figures had municipal ward numbers painted on them, including wards 2, 4, 5, and 6. Another figure hanging in the middle is seen wearing a crown. Above them, a sign that said, "Politics, all tricks, no treats." RCMP said no charges are pending against the property owner, but all this has sparked conversations about threats against politicians. Michael King is with the Organization for the Prevention of Violence. He researches the motivations behind anti-government extremism, and we have reached him in Calgary. Good morning, Michael. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So, you've had a chance to look at the display. What went through your mind when you saw pictures of it?
Well, obviously, it's a bit disturbing to see such a display that seems to openly call for violence against municipal officials. So it's quite worrying.
The display was set up for Halloween. Some might say, it's Halloween, it's harmless. But what do you think of seeing something like this set up?
Well, I think I wouldn't believe that it's necessarily that harmless and that it is simply for Halloween. It had a very obvious political message in the display, so I would take that for what it is, really.
Arm-of-Taché Mayor Armand Poirier told CBC News on Monday that he was very concerned about the emotional impact it would have on municipal officials. How concerned should politicians be about these incidents?
I think politicians should be somewhat concerned. We've seen in the past decade a steep rise in threats of violence against our elected officials. I know the federal government has recently published a report showing a sharp increase of threats against federal elected officials. And there's no reason to believe that that sharp increase is not also happening against provincial officials as well as municipal officials.
Counselors in the community said that they're used to getting angry messages through emails and phone calls, but have never received threats like this one. Michael, at what point does frustration towards policy or politicians turn into anti-authority extremism?
Well, fortunately, it is not often, but we see in this case that it has. So this is really a case of someone who's gone down the rabbit hole of espousing and believing in a conspiracy theory about the government. So when people start espousing sovereignism, they start to believe that the government is actually a fictitious and nefarious actor, that it's not here in the best interest of its citizens, but it actually exists on behalf of a global elite, and it is simply operating to try and steal people's resources and control people and block people from having any type of freedom or rights. So it is. It's not often that people believe this conspiracy theory, but obviously, as we have seen in Manitoba, it does happen sometimes.
Tell us about the research you've done, because you've looked into anti-authority extremism and sovereignism in Canada. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I can tell you that, it's been here in Canada for quite a long time, for several decades now, and it's still, unfortunately, alive and present. It's morphed over time, and it's usually, a loose group of individuals. It's not an organized group. It's these people who find these explanations and believe this kind of alternate reality, and they find each other online, and that's what we're seeing.
What role do you think social media and the internet is playing in all of this these days?
Oh, it's playing a major role. So these people find each other on the internet. They exchange information on the internet. And that's how people also come to believe these conspiracies is via the internet, right? So someone might have, for example, a grievance against a government, not understand why the government is taking certain actions. And then they go and turn to the internet for alternate explanations. And that's where you have these conspiracy theories about what the government is doing and who is really controlling the government. So the internet has a major role to play in this phenomena.
Are there any other contributing factors, do you think, that might lead people to take out their frustrations to this extreme?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of things. One is for sure the level of frustration they have against the government will contribute to whether or not they engage in violence. Also, if they have nothing to lose, so if they're isolated, if they have no family, or for example, they're estranged from their family, there might be nothing holding them back from engaging in violence. And most importantly would be their beliefs about what's going on with the government. You know, if they believe the government is out to take all their money, steal their money, or to maybe come and attack them, violence becomes justifiable.
What kind of impact does this have on the relationships that they may have with other people? You mentioned family. What about friends? What about other relationships in their lives?
Yeah, these conspiracy theories have been known to really rip families apart. You know, usually these are older adults that go down this rabbit hole and start believing these conspiracy theories. And what happens is they often cannot talk about anything else and interpret everything that's going on through these conspiracy theories. So what you'll see is some children, whether young children or adult children, feel like they can no longer have a relationship with their parents because that's all they're talking about, because they feel like it's dangerous, because it's not resonating with their view of reality. So you'll see children being estranged from their parents because of this. In our research, we've done quite a large survey with families who have someone who espouses these types of beliefs in their family, and we've seen the hardships and that this has caused to families.
What can be done to prevent these displays or this sentiment in the future?
I think one thing that can help is definitely increasing people's information literacy. So for people, help people better understand the information that they're consuming online, what's the underlying evidence for whatever theory or explanation that is being offered online. I think that's the way to help try and tackle this phenomena.
I really do appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. Thank you so much for being here.
No, you're very welcome. Thanks a lot for contacting me.
That is Michael King, the Deputy Executive Director of the Organization for the Prevention of Violence. Coming up now to 7:23. Happy birthday to Kingston's Bryan Adams. He turned 66 today, and the man is still going strong on tour. He's right now in Raleigh, North Carolina. Here's a classic from his 1984 record, Reckless. This is Run to You.
Wouldn't hurt her if she didn't know.
A big happy birthday to Bryan Adams. Turns 66 today. That song, that is Run to You. 7:25 right now. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse. -5 right now and clear in Winnipeg. Chilly morning. Wind chill feels like -10. Wind west-northwest at 15. Well, it is time to check in with Scott Regier and sports. And Scott, not a good start for the Winnipeg Jets here on their West Coast trip.
No, not a good start at all last night, losing 3-0 to the Kings in Los Angeles. There was an instance early on in the game that suggested it wasn't going to go the Winnipeg way when Josh Morrissey looked like he'd opened the scoring. However, that goal was immediately waved off due to goaltender interference. Speaking to reporters after the contest, head coach Scott Arniel did not agree with the assessment, but also lamented his team's lack of scoring chances.
I don't think we created enough offense. I didn't think we got to any second opportunities, continuous sort of attacks. When we're on, it's a shot, it's a rebound, and all of a sudden it's another play. Today we were kind of one and done. They did a pretty good job of keeping us on our heels, and I thought tonight this was one of those games offensively where we didn't do enough to win the hockey game.
Part of that lack of offense, Marjorie, has come with the man advantage. Winnipeg's power play once again held off the board, so they have just one power play goal over their past 4 games. So hopefully an easier time to come when they play the Sharks on Friday. San Jose with one of the worst save percentages in the league right now. Although every time I say this about like an underdog against the Jets, things tend to go the other way for them. So scratch what I just said. San Jose is just fine, really.
I feel the same way, and I know a lot of fans do, Scott. Let's talk now about athletes and politics now. Of course, we know yesterday's federal budget came out. It will have a big impact on sport. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Canada's summer and winter Olympians, Marjorie, were left wanting. Prime Minister Carney's first budget is offering no new funding to them. Among those disappointed then will be the CEO of the Canadian Olympic Committee, David Shoemaker. He was seeking an increase of $144 million for his organization. Here's what Shoemaker said to CBC about it just last month.
Eventually, the pressure will become too much to bear and the sports system will collapse as a result of it. Sport is a wonderful thing. I want youngsters to get into sport. I want youngsters that are already in sport to stay in sport. But with the financial pressure that the national sports organizations are facing, they're making decisions to cut back on programming, not just for Olympians, but it's making it more and more inaccessible for young people to get into grassroots sport. And that's not the vision we have for sport in this country.
Shoemaker, Marjorie, had been hopeful the Prime Minister, a former collegiate hockey goalie who's often stated his love for sport and physical activity, would show athletes through this budget they matter. Instead, Olympians and the country's 62 federally funded government sports organizations are left without. It has been 2 decades since 2005 since there was an increase in core funding to those organizations.
Finally, Scott, Blue Jays fans need some good news, and I understand that there is some good news.
The 0-2. There's strike 3 called. He strikes out Ohtani again.
The sound, Marjorie, of Shane Bieber fanning Shohei Ohtani in Game 4 of the World Series. Looks like Bieber wants another crack at winning a championship with Toronto. Multiple reports say he is picking up his player option instead of choosing free agency at the age of 30. Bieber could have exercised a buyout that would have paid him $4 million, and then he could have sold his talents to the highest bidder. So it's safe to say Bieber, who is a former Cy Young Award winner, is leaving a ton of potential earnings on the table to stay with the Jays, a team that since getting dealt to them just before the trade deadline, Bieber's called many times a very, very special group. Hear, hear, and are you listening, Bo Bichette?
Yes. Bo Bichette, we're calling out to you. Let this trickle down, right?
Let it trickle down, yes.
Thank you very much, Scott.
You bet.
Scott Regier with a look at your morning sports. Well, still ahead here on Information Radio, we're going to speak with Heather Hiscox, the award-winning host of CBC Morning Live. After 20 years with the program, Heather is retiring, as you know, and she's celebrating with a special broadcast on CBC television. We're going to hear more coming up. Right now in the city, it is clear and -5. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. Stay with us. Your CBC local news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, Marjorie mentioned that -5. That's out at the airport. If you're downtown, it is 1 degree. We are going to warm up today. This is our last really warmer than seasonal day in a while. A high today of 6 under the sun. We expect that S word to enter our forecast tomorrow. On the floor of the House of Commons today, formal debate gets underway on the Liberal budget. But before the back and forth starts, the Conservatives will have to deal with the loss of one of their MPs, who is now a Liberal after crossing the floor. Nova Scotia MP Chris Detremont says he considers the Liberals' fiscal plan a better path forward for his riding and for the country. Manitoba Premier Rob Canoe says he sees good and bad for the province in yesterday's budget. Ottawa's spending plan mentions the Port of Churchill several times. It says export capacity in the north will be expanded through Hudson Bay with an all-weather road and marine ice-breaking technology. It also reaffirms plans for upgrades to the port and rail line to Churchill. Now, Canoe welcomes those plans, but says something is missing in yesterday's budget.
I think there was an opportunity missed today to signal that the bilateral funding agreements for your healthcare are going to continue. We got one of those expiring next year, $150 million that goes to pay for staff in hospitals and personal care homes. We need to get these deals extended.
Canoe also wants to see more details of the budget's plan to spend more on agriculture at a time when producers are being hit by tariffs. The federal government is earmarking $51 billion over 10 years for infrastructure. It can be used for roads, health facilities, water and waste projects. Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham says Winnipeg needs a chunk of that cash for Phase 3 upgrades at the North End sewage treatment plant and to help pay for other big-ticket projects.
I'll be looking at this for Kenaston Route 90 and Chief Peguis as well. Those are two very important infrastructure projects in the city of Winnipeg that are related to our city's economy, related to trade, and they're important to Winnipeg's future.
The spending on infrastructure is also being welcomed by the Manitoba Heavy Construction Association. Vice President Felicia Wiltshire says the construction industry is glad the federal government's putting such an emphasis on infrastructure projects.
We're pleased to see that the government is recognizing that building infrastructure is really going to help grow the Canadian economy. But I think, like everybody else, we're going to wait to see what the details are, what exactly they're going to be investing in, where those funds are going, and then how much is available for Manitoba.
Wiltshire says the association would like to see funding for projects that help stimulate trade. An example for that are roads to make it easier for companies to move goods across the province, country, and internationally. A Winnipeg veterinarian with a prior disciplinary history has been punished again by Manitoba's regulatory body for veterinarians. This time, he's been ordered to end his practice by next June. Dr. Wen Chao Zheng operates Animal Hospital of Manitoba on Main Street. He was subject to 4 complaints at a hearing of the Manitoba Veterinary Medical Association. Noelle McIver filed one of the complaints after Zhang made an error in surgery on her cat, which later led to the cat's leg needing to be amputated by a different veterinarian.
They need to be holding their doctors at a higher level, a higher standard than other people. And they say in their profile that they're there for the animals, for their welfare. Then prove it.
Zhang says he is ready to retire from practice and feels he's been treated unfairly by the regulatory body. Well, volunteers are already hard at it, packing holiday hampers at Winnipeg's Christmas Cheerboard. Boxes being filled with crackers, pasta, and canned items. The charity started taking requests for holiday hampers yesterday. They've already had hundreds of calls. Shauna Bell is the Cheerboard's executive director.
We're anticipating well over the 21,000 mark this year. Again, it's just a real indicative of the demand, the need that's here in the city right now.
Bell expects up to 22,000 requests this year. She says soaring food prices have created more challenges for the Cheerboard. Zoran Mamdani will be the next mayor of New York City. The 34-year-old was born in Uganda and moved to the Big Apple as a child.
I am young, despite my best efforts to grow older. I am Muslim. I am a democratic socialist. And most most damning of all, I refuse to apologize for any of this.
Mamdani beat former New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo last night for the mayor's job. Also last night, Democrats won races for governor in New Jersey and Virginia. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Losing in L.A. The Winnipeg Jets couldn't score a single goal against the Los Angeles Kings, falling 3-0 last night. It was the first time Captain Adam Lowry has been in the lineup after missing the first 12 games of the season, recovering from off-season surgery. Coach Scott Arniel says it takes time to get up to speed.
Try to get him out there as much as possible. Try not to get him thinking. Just get him playing. And he's missed a lot of time. And I think that he got stronger as the game went on. I think he got more comfortable.
Connor Hellebuck with 23 saves on the night. Next up, the Jets are still in California to face San Jose tomorrow night. You can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Okay, so I take away a couple of things from that Jets loss. Yes, they lost 3-0 to the Kings, but they have Adam Lowry back, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a positive we can take for sure, and then they have a chance to redeem themselves. We heard Scott mention there in Morning Sports, power play needs to be improved on. Hopefully things will change around when they face San Jose here, Heather.
Yeah, I hope so too. And you know what? Adam Lowry, as the coach just said there, like it's a slower start, but he's just going to get better. He's only going to improve each game he plays.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather Wells with your CBC Local News. It is 7:36, and you are listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. Our friend Abby Adeyemi keeping a close eye on that forecast. Abby.
So far, so good, Marjorie. Most of the regions enjoying clear skies at this time, except for Churchill, where we have light snow falling. It's going to be bright across board. Plenty of sunshine to go around, and that light snow further north in the province. Winnipeg right now, hovering between -5 at the airport and 1 degree at the Forks. The sun already made its appearance. It's going to be sunny through the day with light northwest winds, and we'll see highs around 6 degrees, and some clouds will build overnight when that rain would come, and some wet snow tomorrow. Conditions in the Pembina Valley region, we're looking at 0 right now. Lots of sunshine also on its way, warming up to 7. Brandon is at -7, warming up to 5 degrees. Sunshine also in the forecast for you today. Dauphin is sitting at -4 and clear. Plenty of sunshine in the forecast. High around 5 degrees. Gimli -1. It's going to be sunny also. You get to 5 degrees. The power flame flow, we're looking at -3 to -1 in that part of the province. You will see your temperature just gets about 1 later in the day. Thompson -10. Sunny also today. Cold tonight. You drop to -13, and it's going to be chilly tomorrow. Churchill -9. Light snow falling. Strong northwest winds, and your temperature only falling to -11 this afternoon, and it's going to stay near -14 overnight. So it's cold across board, but the sunshine is not really going to do much.
I take the positives and the negatives. Yeah, it's getting cooler, but at least there's sunshine.
There's sunshine.
Yeah, thank you very much, Abby. It's been a quiet morning, traffic-wise, commuter-wise. Still haven't received any calls or any tips about what you're seeing out there. But if anything is affecting your morning commute, again, give us a call. 204-788-3093 is our commuter line. It is 7:38 now. Inflation seems to be never ending, with prices that keep going up and up. Consumers say they are feeling the financial bite. According to Statistics Canada, shoppers paid 4% more at the grocery store in September of 2025 compared with the same period last year. CBC's Felicia Adam asked some grocery shoppers in Winnipeg about what's in their cart and how inflation is impacting how they fill their pantries.
My name is Doug Fenyuk. Mostly it was just filler-up stuff, just stuff like Kleenexes and paper towel, cat food, and juices, and just stuff to fill the pantry again.
How much did this cost you?
It was like $115. Careful what we buy, and we try to buy with stuff that's on sale. I definitely look at the flyers a lot more than I used to. I've noticed that the meat and the vegetables have increased quite a bit, almost double, I would say over the last year or so, or somewhere in there. I don't think we have a whole lot of choice on how it's going to go, but of course I don't like it like anybody else. I don't want to pay more than I have to, but especially if somebody's living on a limited income, it's pretty tough for some people. I'd say it's about 1.5 compared to what it has been in the past. So over the last 2 years, it's almost, I'd say about 50% more. in pricing. Traveling's gotten a lot more expensive too. So don't have a lot of choice in it. If you want to go, you got to pay. If you want to eat, you have to pay.
My name's Ross, and I'm Spearman. Soup was on sale for 97 cents, so that's why.
Is it a good day for you?
Well, it's always a good day. Soup is like $2 everywhere, eh? Well, especially meats. Like I can walk into a grocery store and I won't even buy anything because I just walk the aisles and say I'm not paying that for, a little scrawny piece of meat. It's like $40. It's horrible. Yeah. So.
And so today, what did you buy and how much did that
I
cost?
just bought the soup. It was cheap because I bought everything on sale. I bought soup, 12 of those, and I bought grapes. They were cheap, and chips.
And how much did that cost you all?
$22. It's at least an extra 10 or 15 bucks every time you come now. And I'm just a single guy and shopping for one, so it's crazy. Well, I wait and I really try to make everything last at home until I need stuff, But I wait for sales all the time. I always have stuff at home. Sometimes it's cheaper to go out and just get something to eat, than buy food.
That was CBC's Felicia Adams speaking with grocery shoppers here in Winnipeg.
At the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, Canadians pause to reflect and remember for those who served, for those who fought, for those who died, and for those who returned home. On November 11th, live from the National War Memorial in Ottawa, join CBC News for special coverage of the Remembrance Day ceremony on CBC and local streaming channels.
Tomorrow, CBC TV is airing a special edition of CBC Morning Live with Heather Hiscox. As you know, it'll be Hiscox's final broadcast before she retires from her extraordinary 40-year award-winning career in journalism, 20 of those hosting the show. Tomorrow, Hiscox will not only say goodbye, but give us a glimpse into her recent 4-city Canadian tour where she spoke to local residents, including here in Steinbach, spoke with officials and changemakers. 3 of those locations, Hudson, Quebec, Steinbach, Manitoba, as I mentioned, and Lloydminster, which straddles both Alberta and Saskatchewan, now contain new CBC bureaus. I spoke with Heather about this, as well as reflect on her upcoming retirement.
Marjorie, thank you. Thank you for that intro because it's enabling me to prepare emotionally for what's coming up on Thursday. The departure. It is looming. It is looming.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
Over the last couple of months, you did live broadcasts in 4 Canadian cities you toured, including Steinbach, Manitoba here. Can you tell us a little bit more about the locations and how the visits went?
I enjoyed every one, and I spoke to Marcy when we were in the area for Steinbach, and we talked at that time. It was our first stop. And Steinbach and Lloydminster on the border, as you say, and Hudson, Quebec, we chose all of those for a couple of reasons. CBC has put the real emphasis of late on local journalism, which needs such a boost right now in Canada and elsewhere, and opened these small pop-up bureaus with young journalists across the country. So Steinbach is one, and we were able to introduce Christopher Garreau to our national audience. But we chose those locations, again, to emphasize really the thinking behind setting up those bureaus, that there are communities in the country which are smaller, generally many of them are in the West, which have wonderful stories to be told and are underrepresented in terms of their coverage. So we proved the points in those communities for sure. Fascinating. Look, Steinbach, for example, just to revisit it, here is one of the fastest growing cities in your province, and it is a city, as you well know, with a tremendously deep and rich Mennonite heritage, but needing to welcome newcomers in order to grow, continue to grow, and to boost its economy. So they have this really targeted plan for growth and how they're welcoming newcomers and how they are fitting in with the traditional community. Really interesting to observe. The Southeast Event Center opened as we were there. It was really representative, symbolic, I thought, of a community that is very confident about its future. And then we had all sorts of little stories about, the interesting characters in the community and the things that are happening there, the Fueled by Pork motto and things of that nature, with High Life being so important in the community. So that was such a success in Steinbach and really representative of what we did in all of those small communities. And the response was wonderful from across the country. How they appreciated, our viewers appreciated, shining the spotlight on communities about which they probably knew little and had seen little coverage of, and really enjoyed seeing those stories to which they could relate. It was wonderful, and we carried that on coast to coast to coast. And it was so nice because I had sort of thought when I was retiring, Marjorie, that I would just slink out of the building after my last show. And my bosses assured me that was not to be the case. So enabled to focus on these new communities and at the same time have a chance to connect one final time face to face with our audience. It was a wonderful gift.
Now, Heather, the last leg of your tour brought you to Owen Sound, Ontario, which is your hometown and where your incredible journalism career began. What was that experience like for you, going back to where it all began?
It was like a high school reunion. It was just wonderful. It was a joyous celebration, and it was our biggest production of the farewell tour. We took over the downtown Main Street. We blocked off the street and built a big stage and had a jazz band and dancers. It was, as I said, it was a celebration in concert with the city and with the local broadcaster, Bayshore Broadcasting, which is where I began when I was 17 years old, so 43 years ago. And, it was just really, it was a little bit different from the three prior road shows in that it was meant to be, yes, it was meant to be a showcase of Owen Sound, and we had some incredibly rich stories to share. But it was also to say thank you and to come full circle, because I started in Owen Sound as a 17-year-old, still in high school, having been offered a job as a part-time radio announcer at the local radio station. And then here I was coming back home at the end of the career, and interesting timing because the AM radio station where I began was just about to turn off the signal for good that very week and become an FM signal. So it was kind of a full circle moment for both of us, and it was really nice. But it was my high school friends were there, and high school teachers and childhood, oh my goodness, babysitters. Everybody was there. It was a big, big Owen Sound celebration.
As you head into retirement, what do you think you're going to miss or take away with you when you leave broadcasting?
So when I started as a 17-year-old, I had no idea that this was going to be my career path. I was thinking law school at that point. I was just about to head off to university. But I had this incredible offer of a summer job. And from that first shift, I loved the business. I loved the work. I loved the people. I loved being, involved in the story. So I was a part-time radio announcer, but that summer job became weekend shifts, became more summer jobs, and suddenly I decided forget law school and let's pursue graduate study in journalism. But it's the work itself, it's the nature of the work itself, which may very well have drawn you. It's this constant exhilaration and challenge and dynamism. For me, it's always been about being right at the center of the story and accessing incredible people, wise and experienced people from all walks of life, and personally learning every single day, challenging myself every day. So the nature of the work I've loved every moment, and I love it just as much today as I did when I started. And then the missing and taking away, I think, is what the work has led me to, and that is this incredible audience that I have developed over the years at the morning show. And I've been hearing from so many viewers how much they've appreciated my work and my approach to it, and have really expressed, sadness at my going, but also, you'll understand the morning connection. It's particular. It's different from other parts of the day and different from other newscasts. And over the years, you develop a personal relationship, and there's a comfort and there's a constancy to turning on the television, and there I am. And particularly during COVID, when people were really uncertain and fearful and everything was shut down and changing. We were here, and I was here every day, and that really, I think, galvanized this relationship that people are expressing me and to me, and expressing that they're going to be sorry to lose it. So I feel like that the work has been appreciated and valued by people in this country, that it's meant something. That's what I'll take away, and I'm so grateful for it. I know, or I hope, I believe, that there will be exciting opportunities and new adventures after Thursday, but it's interesting because I know full well there will never be a 4-hour national conversation with Canadians every single morning, and I'll miss that very, very much, I know.
Well, Heather, we're going to miss you on the airwaves. Morning television isn't going to be the same without you. Thank you for joining us here on the show. Congratulations on your career, and thank you so much again.
Thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Heather Hiscox is the host of CBC Morning Live with Heather Hiscox. Tomorrow, she'll celebrate her 20th anniversary in the role in her final broadcast before retiring. This special edition of the show airs from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. That's Eastern Time. So 5 a.m., I believe, to 9 a.m. Central Time on CBC Television News Network. It is coming up now to 7:51. A city committee heard from several advocates yesterday about possible solutions to end homelessness in Winnipeg. As of November 17, encampments will be banned from being set up near playgrounds, pools, daycares, and transit shelters, just to name a few. At least not during daylight hours. Greg McPherson is Winnipeg's acting manager of community development. He spoke with CBC host Faith Fundal about the purpose of these new restrictions.
People are setting up camp, and in anticipation of them receiving housing, we've really been somewhat hands-off, I think is a good way to put it. And what we've seen happening in that instance is a lot of our public spaces have been degraded. They're not as safe as we need them to be. And certainly I think that for the general public, they're seeing that. And my worry as a civic representative, as a member of the public service, is I think it's not good for our population to feel that they can't trust the city to deliver its own mandates. Places where there might be families present and particularly children, they've asked us to prioritize those for enforcement. But we're still going to be working from a place of compassion. We have a duty of care. We want to be as reasonable as possible with people. We'll be approaching them through our outreach partners. None of that changes. The only difference is we can say with authority, we are no longer supporting camping on this site. We need you to find another place.
That was Greg McPherson, Winnipeg's acting manager of community development, speaking with CBC's Faith Fundal on Up to Speed. Marion Willis is founder and executive director of St. Boniface Street Links. She's hoping the city will look at other options like setting designated and managed encampment sites. She made that case at City Hall yesterday, and Marion joins us now via Zoom. Good morning. Welcome to the show, Marion.
Good morning.
Why did you think managed encampment sites are the answer?
Well, we can't just shuffle people along. And if you look along waterfront, we always hear about the encampments behind the Granite Curling Club, St. John's Park, Midwinter, Louise Bridge. If you look at where a lot of the encampments are, those are individuals that were housed and they were displaced by the various shuttering of buildings that were shuttered by bylaws and Winnipeg Fire Service at one point. So clearly, if that's a lot of the population that is currently homeless, then simply moving people along didn't help. It actually created the circumstances that we're dealing with today. I think we need to do more. And I think a managed encampment to housing site, and the mandate is in that title, managed encampment to housing, a triage area where we can maybe take, waterfront, as the first group, get everybody in there linked to income supports, and let's match them to housing, move them out, bring in the next group. I'm thinking a maximum of 20 tents at a time or 20 shelters at a time. Mm-hmm. And let's just really do the work to try to end homelessness here. If we try to just displace people, we haven't solved anything. There'll be more emergency calls. There'll be more violence. There'll be more of all the things that the city hopes to change because, people out there, even in encampment, are pretty much in survival mode. You take away what little they have, and it just amplifies everything.
Now,
So-
Marion, I want to ask you, because you talked about this during yesterday's committee meeting. You recently visited Halifax, which has designated sites. What did you learn in your time there?
Well, yes, I did. And I thought I think there's something for us to learn from Halifax. The Halifax model isn't perfect. I don't think there's a perfect model in Canada. But what I did think about Halifax was if they were actually managed sites, they're not managed sites, they're service sites. But I think if we had a site that was both serviced and managed, that was given a specific mandate, I really think we could kind of perfect that designated encampment model. And you know what? It can get worse. Well, it can get worse here in Winnipeg if we don't take these steps. But I think we've got nothing to lose from trying. I mean, what we've been doing so far hasn't worked. So, maybe it's time for Winnipeg to turn the page and let's move forward with to try a strategy that maybe, keeps the eye on the end game here, which is ending homelessness.
So, Marion, let me ask you this. If the reality of having a supervised site were to happen, who would be supervising, who would be overseeing these managed sites?
Well, actually, we would like to run the site. I think, if you play to the strengths of outreach teams in the city, Main Street Project is the sole provider to Your Way Home. They're a good match to Your Way Home. St. Boniface Street Links is really the encampment to housing team. We've been doing that for 4 years. Our outcomes kind of speak for themselves. There's End Homelessness Winnipeg, and they have the Reaching Home Agreement and all their funded organizations and various forms of outreach. I think if we could just open ourselves up to realize it's going to take more than one approach to end homelessness in this city. We need to start playing to the strengths of organizations and maximizing on those strengths, because together, if we can unite that way with 3 different pillars, what unites all of us is the end game. Let's not forget the plot. It's to end homelessness.
Marion, I'm going to ask you this because, we have about a minute left. So I want to get to a couple more questions here. Now, the city has said that enforcement would only take place. This is about the city talking about the what's coming on November 17th. The city has said that enforcement would only take place during the day and that there would be outreach workers assisting people when they're asked to move. What have you heard from people experiencing homelessness about this?
Not much. I don't think that the people experiencing homelessness really know anything about this ban. I think that this is going to be quite shocking for most of them.
You also,
I think the only orgs that really did anything was CBC did a great piece on encampments that I think Cameron did.
We have 30 seconds left here. So quickly, Marion, I want to ask you, you've called on the private sector to build more affordable homes that would curb the housing crisis. How do you think they could be incentivized to invest in more affordable housing?
Yes, I'm not necessarily talking about building. We have a lot of housing stock out there within the private sector. I think the province and the city need to think about how they can incentivize a broader participation by the private sector. We use the private sector. We house people every single day. There is housing out there. We're not going to end homelessness through the public housing system. It will be the private sector that gets us out of this. We need to engage them as partners, and we need to do that now. And we need to do that with sign-on bonuses, with incentives that help cover some of the damages.
Yeah.
And the one thing that's really critical is,
and Marion, we have about 5 seconds left here. Sorry.
Yep. Sorry, I have to say this. We all talk about wraparound services. Somebody needs to fund those.
Thank you very much, Marion. Really do appreciate you joining us on the show today. Thank you so much for your time. That is Marion Willis, the founder and executive director of St. Boniface Street Links. Stay with us. World Report is coming up next.
You'll hear Afi Yervinen, a.k.a. Bahamas, talk about whether or not he's thinking about wrapping things up as a musician.
Take me to the bridge and let me walk upon
Q with Tom Power this morning at 10. 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current.
I'm Pia Chattopadhyay. Hockey scouts travel around our country looking for the best players in the nation, and they're full of stories about the excitement of putting together winning teams. The life of a hockey scout coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young.
Now is not the time to be cautious because fortune favors the bold. It is a time to get big things done for Canadians and get them done fast.
Prime Minister Mark Carney selling Canadians on his government's new federal budget. Today is the first of 4 days of debate in the House of Commons. It will lead up to a critical confidence vote. But first thing this morning, caucus meetings. And they will feature one less Conservative and one more Liberal. Janice McGregor joins us from our Parliamentary Bureau. Janice, how has the political math changed as a result of this budget?
Marcia, Chris D'Entremont appears to have timed his announcement to inflict maximum political damage, just as the budget was about to be read in the House of Commons, pulling the opposition leader out of his seat to deal with it, and overshadowing, essentially drowning out anything else Conservatives had to say, critiquing the budget itself for the rest of the evening. When he crossed the floor, former caucus colleagues did not hold back their venom. Here's Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer speaking to As It Happens last night.
Mr. D'Entremont has looked at the massive amounts of debt and deficit that Mark Carney is telling Canadians they're going to have to sacrifice to pay off, and then I guess he put up his hand and said, sounds great to me.
Now, Poilievre, remember, faces a leadership review in a few months, losing his only MP from Nova Scotia, now the clearest signal yet of discontent in the ranks. Liberals claim not to know this was coming. On his way into cabinet in the morning, government whip Mark Garretson told reporters he wasn't having conversations with anyone about moving to the government side. By the end of the day, he was welcoming a floor crosser into the fold.
So that is one vote sorted, 2 to go. What if no one else is willing to cross the floor?
Well, most eyes now are on the 7 New Democrats. This budget focuses pressure on several potential pain points for them. Could they really vote against billions in funding for new healthcare facilities? And there's a list in this budget of specific community infrastructure identified for funding, including a Filipino community center in interim leader Don Davies' riding, a theater in Heather McPherson's Edmonton riding, and the Inuit Nunagat University, which is potentially dear to the heart of Nunavut MP Lori Idlout. Bright orange carrots hiding in plain sight right there in the budget book, should they need a reason to vote yes just this once.
Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. The centerpiece of the federal budget is a $51 billion infrastructure program. It's called the Build Communities Strong Fund. Karen Pauls has more on where that money is going and what the government wants it to achieve.
As this construction crew was pouring concrete to fix sidewalks on a busy Winnipeg street, Federal Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne was announcing $51 billion in local infrastructure investments over the next decade.
And we will build infrastructure in communities all across Canada with the new Build Communities Strong Fund, Mr. Speaker.
That includes roads, recreation and athletic centers, and hospitals.
This fund will build Canada strong, Mr. Speaker.
We're pleased to see that the government is recognizing that building infrastructure is really going to help grow the Canadian economy.
But Felicia Wiltshire of the Manitoba Heavy Construction Association wants more details.
What exactly they're going to be investing in, where those funds are going, and then how much is available for Manitoba.
Housing is also a key pillar, with $25 billion in new money and about $130 billion in total federal housing commitments over 5 years. Champagne describes it as the most ambitious housing plan since the Second World War.
So we approach today's budget with cautious optimism.
Calgary's new mayor, Jeremy Farkas, is watching closely with his shopping list.
We need not only more homes, but also the roads, transit, and services and utilities that will make the families that live in those homes successful.
The Liberals are aiming to double the pace of construction over the next decade, promising a speed and scale not seen in generations. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
There are growing calls for EU nations to increase their air defenses. Drones flying near some airports in Europe are forcing them to shut down. Belgium's business airport is the latest to suspend its operations. It was closed for hours last night after several drone sightings. NATO says it is continuing extra aerial patrols along the alliance's eastern flank. The CBC's Briar Stewart is on board a surveillance aircraft.
Take off. Set for
A NATO surveillance aircraft departs from a base in western Germany bound for Polish skies. The plane has a large radar dome that allows the crew to see more than 500 kilometers in any direction. NATO launched this monitoring mission in September after around 20 Russian drones crossed into Polish airspace, with a number of them crashing. At the time, Russia said it hadn't been directly targeting anything in Poland.
We are here flying to deter, detect, and defend.
Captain Indy is a Canadian surveillance controller who's only being identified by his call sign and rank, in line with NATO protocol.
Especially with the incursions a couple of months ago. So we want to make sure that we're able to see everything that's coming into NATO airspace.
And if necessary, to intercept them. But small, lightweight drones can be a challenge for the radar to pick up, which is why Europe wants to beef up its air defenses, especially after a number of airports have had to close in recent weeks. Jakob Kukogo is based in Brussels and is a senior fellow with the Peterson Institute.
There is a sort of element of whack-a-mole or hide and seek here. These drones, whoever launches them or for wherever they're launched, they don't linger.
The EU Commission has called the recent drone sightings near airports a type of hybrid warfare. And while most haven't pointed the finger directly at Russia, Belgium's defense minister said Tuesday's incidents were carried out by professionals intent on destabilizing the country. Briar Stewart, CBC News, in a NATO plane in Polish airspace.
The U.S. government shutdown has reached a milestone. It is now the longest in history. The impasse between Republicans and Democrats is now in its 36th day. The parties continue to blame each other for causing the shutdown. Republicans claim their bill to extend federal funds is not controversial. But Democrats say they will not support the legislation unless it includes an extension for expiring health care benefits. It was a big night for Democrats in the U.S. The party was able to win some key elections, including for 2 new governors, one in Virginia, one in New Jersey. In California, voters approved Proposition 50. It allows the state to redraw its district map. That is another boost for the Democrats heading into next year's midterm elections. But one of the biggest races of the night played out in New York City. Zohran Mamdani pulled in more than 50% of the vote to become the city's next mayor. Katie Nicholson has that story.
A triumphant end to a juggernaut of a campaign.
The working people of New York have been told by the wealthy and the well-connected that power does not belong in their hands.
Zohran Mamdani with a fiery speech.
Over the last 12 months, you have dared to reach for something greater. Tonight, against all odds, we have grasped it. The future is in our hands.
The 34-year-old Democratic socialist rapidly ascended to mayor-elect on promises to make life in New York more affordable. More than 2 million cast a ballot, the first time New York has seen that high a turnout since 1969. This race, seen by some as a barometer reading 1 year after voters elected Donald Trump to a second term in the Oval Office, and 1 year before the crucial midterm elections. Trump injected himself into the New York race. He endorsed former Governor Andrew Cuomo, a longtime Democrat, and suggested he would pull federal funding from the city if Mamdani won.
So Donald Trump, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up.
The New York results and other big Democratic wins seen by some Democrats and analysts as a repudiation of Trump's first 10 months in office. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Washington.
ABBA won the Eurovision contest with this song back in 1974. It launched the band's global career. The question now is, could a Canadian band be next? In case you missed it, the federal budget included an exciting little nugget yesterday. It said the government is working with CBC to explore Canada's participation in the International Song Contest. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You are listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, on the CBC Listen app and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up on this hour of the show, we are talking about, yes, the federal budget. As you know, the budget was released yesterday. We're going to hear from 3 Gen Z panelists here in Manitoba, all with different political views for their thoughts on the federal budget. Also, as you know, I'm hosting today Information Radio, filling in for Marcy Marcusa. That's because Marcy is up in Flin Flon. A team here from CBC Manitoba is up in Flin Flon. We're going to check in with Marcy here to see what's happening up north. Stay tuned for that. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, and on the CBC Listen app. At 8:11, here now is Heather Wells with a look at your local news headlines. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, the Prime Minister is out selling his budget to Canadians this morning. Manitoba's Premier says he sees positives for this province. Wab Canoe says mentions of the Port of Churchill in the spending plan are good. But Canoe says what concerns him is the lack of bilateral funding for health care, as well as a lack of details on spending for agriculture at a time when producers are being hit by tariffs. Volunteers are already hard at it, packing holiday hampers at Winnipeg's Christmas Cheerboard. The charity started taking requests for hampers yesterday, and they've already had hundreds of calls. The executive director, Shauna Bell, expects up to 22,000 requests for holiday hampers this year. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 8:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather Wells with your CBC local news headlines. Let's say good morning to the wonderful crew here on Information Radio. May McKillop is the show director. Darren Morash behind the controls. They're running our feed on CBC Manitoba's YouTube stream. Abby is our tech and also keeping an eye on the forecast. And Abby, above seasonal continues, but then tomorrow comes a big change.
Yeah, the big change overnight. We're going to see some rain overnight. That will transition to wet snow, so be prepared for that. But let's deal with today. Let's enjoy today. Soak it in. Sunny across board. Sunshine dominates the south, while the north will see a few clouds and flurries. We're still having that light snow falling in Churchill at this time, with temperatures hovering around -10 and -9. Up north, we're seeing similar conditions. Winnipeg right now, -4 at the airport and 1 degree at the Forks. It's clear there. We should see lots of sunshine today. Light northwest winds and highs near 6 degrees. And then for tonight, that's going to bring that cloud away, and lows will drop to around -4, with the rain arriving and changing to a mix of rain and snow by late afternoon tomorrow. Up in the power, we're looking at -1 and -2 at this time. Thompson at -10. Winnipeg at the Fox, we're reading 1 degree.
1 degree, a little bit cooler out at the airport. So just a little bit cooler outside of the downtown area. Thank you very much, Abby. Traffic-wise, well, nothing to report. We haven't received any calls, any tips to our commuter line. But if you are seeing something out there that might be affecting where you're heading this morning, give us a call on our commuter line, 204-788-3093. Well, usually when people say welcome to the Rock, you might think of Newfoundland. But in Manitoba, Flin Flon is a northern city with a population of 5,000 that has the same feisty can-do spirit as the folks on the east coast of Canada. At least that's what CBC's Marcy Marcusa is finding out. She's up there right now with a team of reporters and producers for Communities in Focus. Well, hi, Marcy.
Hey, I hope you can see me on Zoom and maybe catch some of that Manitoba Rock behind me, Marge.
I
Thanks for, filling in.
Yeah, I absolutely can see it. It looks beautiful behind you. It looks like a lot clearer than it is right now in Winnipeg. What specifically are you doing this morning, Marcy?
Well, I'll tell you what, we're here to explore Flin Our team's been up here all week. Corey and I got here yesterday and had some time to be around town. Let me place where I am right now. We're just off the highway. Big welcome to Flin Flon. This guy's going to be familiar if you know anything about your Manitoba history. Can we see him there in the shot, Corey? There he is, Josiah Flintabani Flonaton. I always say the name wrong. They call him Flinty. This is the Al Cap character from a dime store novel that Tom Creighton happened to pick up. He was a prospector here back in the day, and he named the town after this character. And so there's the statue. So the thing about that is one of the things we're going to have on the show tomorrow is going to talk about the fact that while people are still learning that Tom Creighton was the founder of this city in Manitoba, he wasn't the first person. And he wasn't the only founder. David Collins was a Métis trapper. He was the one that told Tom Creighton that there could be something here to mine. And boy, there was, of course. So we're going to hear that story. His great-great-granddaughter still lives in Flin Flon. But I just got to say, every time I come north, 630 kilometers up from Winnipeg, that's where Flin Flon is, city of 5,000. Most of you know it because of the fires this summer, unfortunately. But every time I come north, I am reminded of what you said, Marge. How clear it is when it's a clear day, how blue the sky is up north, how crisp and clean the air feels when you're here. And it really is crisp and clear today. And just the beautiful rocky terrain. Corey can go this way and just have a look behind us. You forget how much of it there is and how much of this city really is built right into the rock that gave this town for years its economic prosperity.
So, Marcy, what's it been like exploring Flin Flon?
Well, I think it's interesting because I haven't been up here for some time. I did come up with a CBC group years ago, and we were here exploring it at that time, but the mine was open. So let's remember that the mine here in Flin Flon closed in 2022. Why has the town still been surviving? Well, a lot of those miners and workers still work at a mine. It's just that it's at the Snow Lake mine. That's about 200 kilometers east here of Flin Flon in this city. And so they still travel back and forth. But the reality of Flin Flon today is they are trying to figure out what their economic future is going to be. And they have a lot of people here, though, as you mentioned, with that can-do spirit. If they don't have funding, they fundraise. It's something actually they talk about, that they feel their share of provincial funding for all kinds of things, from homeless shelters to projects. If they don't have people that can do the work, or they don't have positions that can be paid, they volunteer, and we're hearing that a lot. One of their dreams is to be almost an arts central hub here in the north. We're going to hear a little bit about that on tomorrow's show, so that's been interesting exploring. And then also really just exploring the beauty has been quite something here in Flin Flon. Corey and I yesterday were driving around to the different neighborhoods, up and down the rocks, and every corner gives a different vantage point of the view of Ross Lake, which sits right in the middle of the city. And Corey was noticing these sort of planks that were going up along people's front lawns in some cases. Almost looked like a toboggan run. Well, it was pipes, of course, because in some of the properties you can't put the pipes underground. They have to be covered in wood, like a wood walkway as used. And the water runs continually above ground because of the rocky terrain. So some of this has been just about exploring the beauty of Manitoba's north. Tomorrow's show will be that, but also about exploring the future of Flin Flon.
And I mean, you're broadcasting live from there. You gave us a little bit, but anything else that we can expect to hear coming up on the show tomorrow, Marcy?
Well, two interesting things I'll leave you with. One is Rosanna Hempel, who is also here, CBC reporter, will bring us the tale of two Flin Flons. For those that don't know, Flin Flon is also a border town. And so that means that they're, right next door to Saskatchewan. You can walk over the border. What does that mean for interprovincial trade in these times? Also, what does that mean for residents that pay taxes on one side and maybe work in the other? So she'll have that for us. And in addition, I want to mention that we will not leave the fires untouched. During covering the fires down south, one of the things we couldn't do was get a hold of firefighters. Why? Well, they were too busy. We're going to hear from some of those brave firefighters. Hi, good morning. There's some Flin Floners. We're going to hear from some of those firefighters tomorrow morning about what it meant to save the city, even in the face of moments where they were losing their own properties. So that's all coming up tomorrow in a very special edition of InfoRad.
Thank you very much, Marcy. Enjoy your time up there. Looking forward to tomorrow's broadcast.
Take care.
Marcy Marcusa is in Flin Flon tomorrow. The show is live from the Orange Toad, which is a restaurant in the northern city. And remember, you can listen or watch the live stream on YouTube. Coming up now to 8:19. As you heard, the federal government just unveiled their latest budget. This is the first time for Prime Minister Mark Carney. Both he and Federal Finance Minister Francois Philippe Champagne have warned there will be austerity measures. Canada will go into a $78 billion deficit this fiscal year in the hopes of making, quote, generational investments for the growth of Canadians. So, how do young people feel about these measures? For reaction, we are now joined by our Gen Z panel. Victoria Romero is a political science student at the University of Manitoba. Hello, Victoria.
Hi.
Kai Giselle is also a student at the University of Manitoba studying economics. Good morning, Kai.
Good morning.
And Riley Gerard is an RRC Polytech student studying creative communications. Good morning, Riley.
Good morning.
Thank you all for being here. I'm going to ask everyone this question, and I'll go to each one of you. What did you hear in this budget that would get the attention of you and other young people in this country? I'm going to start with you, Victoria.
Overall, this budget signaled to me that Mark Carney really cares about those at the top of big business and not the workers inside of it.
Okay. And Kai, what about you? What do you think?
The price tag, $78 billion. That's the biggest deficit that the Liberals have ever run since they first came to power in 2015, outside of the 2 COVID years. Mm-hmm. So despite what they talk about when it comes to cutting back on government spending or dividing up the budget, the deficit still grows.
Riley, I want to ask you, what do you think about this budget?
Well, I think it's exciting that Mark Carney just released a budget. I think that, in general, I was excited to hear about the budget just knowing it was coming out. And I hope that other young people thought the same way. And I think there's a lot of exciting stuff in there. It's kind of hard to narrow it down to one key point. But there's a lot in there that I think is really interesting.
Yeah, and there's a lot to unpack here. So let's dig a little bit more deeper into this. Where do you think this budget missed the mark when it comes to young people in Canada? I'm going to start with you, Kai.
I think it missed the mark when the Prime Minister gave his address a couple of weeks ago where he said that young people needed to make sacrifices. I don't know what more sacrifices he wants young people to make. I think about the last 10 years of Liberal governance, economic decline, job and housing markets on the brink. If that wasn't sacrifice enough, I don't know what more is. In terms of the price tag of $78 billion, that deficit, which is ever growing and has no plan to ever be paid down, is going to be the debt burden of younger generations. We're going to increasingly spend more on interest in servicing our national debt when we could be spending it on many other things. Repeatedly running deficit raises the long-term interest rates on Canada's bonds. This is not a fiscally responsible thing to be doing because we've been running deficits both in times of good economic growth and also the last 3 or 4 black swan events.
Riley, I want to ask you this. What do you think the budget missed when it came to investing in young people?
I think that this budget really missed the mark in its branding. It branded itself, and Carney branded the budget as a generational spend less to invest more. And I think that in general, the budget kind of missed the mark there. I think that this budget has a lot of ideas with no plan or concrete way of reaching those goals. And I think that kind of missed the mark of like, okay, this is awesome, great things we're hearing, but how are we going to actually do this? How is this going to work? And I think that is where the budget really missed the mark.
And Victoria, what do you think of this? What do you think the budget missed here in terms of investing in young people?
Yeah, I usually wouldn't have an issue with a deficit. I don't think that a government spending on their people is necessarily a bad thing, but there was no generational investment like Mark Carney continues to claim. That generational investment is coming at the, corporate tax breaks and things like, new capital cost allowance for LNG development and pouring money into things that young people don't support. I know I have a lot of friends that are very concerned about the trajectory that our country is headed in climate, in what we're investing in. The investments in social services, there was very few new investments in that. Of course, some things were continued and not ended or made permanent, but there was very few new investments in that. And it seems to be definitely speaking to the CEOs of big oil that Mark Carney is concerned about.
Now, Riley, I want to ask you this because the budget would cut 50% of its temporary residents like international students and temporary foreign workers to reduce the pressure on Canada's housing needs and healthcare system. What do you think of that?
I mean, it's sad and it's disappointing. I think that, no one wants to see less international students or foreign workers coming, but it's at the same time, like Carney said, sacrifices did have to be made. I wish that there were other places that the sacrifices could have been made, but, I think that it's not a bad step forward in thinking how to improve the deficit and how to balance the budget.
So you talked about other places where sacrifices could have been made. Where do you think that could have been?
I think a big thing that surprised me in the budget was how much AI is being rolled out. And I'm kind of curious about how much that is going to cost. And they're talking about how they want to save so much money by implementing AI into a lot of different areas in government services. And my big question is, okay, how much that is going to cost? Could that not have been sacrificed? Like, why did we need to implement so much AI into our government? I think that is kind of an area that maybe the government shouldn't be relying on more. And I think that, speaking a good thing to the budget where they want to bring in more like quote unquote talented workers, I think maybe that would have been a better place to invest. And I think that, so much AI is a little much in the budget.
Kai, the budget says that it will cut the public service by 40,000 people by the end of the decade in hopes of investing more towards nation-building infrastructure, clean energy, innovation, productivity, and less on day-to-day operating spending. What do you think of this?
Yeah, I think it's a good move to break the budget into operational and investment spending. The key is just to make sure that you keep the investment spending portion of that budget focused on things like infrastructure or a battery plant growth, whether you want to have traditional energy sources like we build an east-west pipeline that's taxpayer funded, or whether it's in renewable energies. But in terms of his cutbacks on the public sector and the deficit, he's kind of in the worst of both worlds because he's willing to make the tough decisions, but he's not willing to go far enough with the 10 to 15% shrinking of the Canadian bureaucracy, but it's still the biggest deficit ever for this government. So if he wanted to have a smaller deficit, he totally could have, but he just is unwilling to do so because, well, they're a Liberal government after all.
Mm-hmm.
They rely on the votes of so many of the people that this budget is not necessarily geared towards, so that when tough decisions need to be made, they don't have the mandate to do so.
So let me ask you this. What would have been more realistic when it comes to a deficit budget? There were some experts that were expecting that this would be a higher deficit. It came out at $78 billion. Is there something that you think would have been a little bit more realistic or more?
Yeah, I don't think having it on the low end of the high 78 is, lower than 100, but we're still talking 78 compared to, say, in 2015, 2016, when the government was running a $15 billion deficit. I think that if the Prime Minister and the Liberals had a plan to end the deficit spending at a certain point, like at least like Trudeau in the initial days had a plan to pay it off by 2019 before like completely abandoning that idea. And when the Conservatives campaigned, they campaigned on fixing the budget so that it would at least have a plan to eventually get back to balance. We don't see that in this budget. There was almost no mention of it.
Victoria, I want to ask you this. The government also outlines a path to eliminate some of the emissions caps proposed by the previous Trudeau government by encouraging companies to invest in emission reductions in the hopes of driving investment, not prohibitions. What do you think?
I think that's an incredibly dangerous move. It disagrees with science. It disagrees with many experts who have, hailed this as a way to reduce emissions. Many experts have accepted that climate change is an inevitable reality that we cannot evade. And what we need to do is ensure that every step, every national project, every investment we are making is one that's in line with protecting the planet. And this is not it. I know young people across the country are worried about this. I was in Ottawa for the first Citizens Assembly on Climate in Canada and the first Youth Citizens Assembly on Climate in the world. People from coast to coast are incredibly worried about the climate crisis. And a lot of that anxiety comes from the government's bailouts of oil and gas.
So let me ask you this as a young person. What would you have liked to have seen in the budget that addresses some of those environmental concerns?
There is a way to invest in nation-building projects without costing, our livelihood and the safety and the health of the planet that we live on. There are some things, such as high-speed rail, other things that we can invest in. I know the budget did explicitly mention the east-west energy grid. Those things are good, but we need to be turning away from LNG. We need to be turning away from pipelines and from exploitative, extractive resource mining.
I'm going to go around the table here because we have about a minute and a half left here in our panel. This is a minority government, as you all know. This is a confidence vote. If the budget fails to pass, it could trigger another federal election. Is this something that you would support? Why or why not? I'm going to start with you, Riley.
Personally, I don't think that this is going to trigger an election. I think they're 3, potentially now even 2 votes short of that majority government. I think that enough opposition members will be able to agree and agree and vote for this budget. I think that no Canadian wants another election right now. I don't think any politician can afford an election right now. And I think with the U.S. trade war right now, all Canadians need is stability, and I don't think an election will happen, and I don't think that is what Canada can handle right now.
Kai, what are your thoughts on this?
I hope that we do have an election. I think the Conservatives should vote against the budget for no fact other than they're the official opposition, and to vote for it would be an endorsement of the government's agenda. If we go to an election, I hope either party, particularly the Conservatives, can get a majority, because after all these years, we still have these minority governments where the fate of the country lays in the hands of the NDP. And I don't know whether the NDP is going to, after decimation last spring, still keep voting for Liberal confidence budgets, or whether they'll pull the plug and say, no, let's go to the polls. And if they're thinking about that, ask the Social Credit Party in the 1980 election that brought down Joe Clark's government how that worked out for them. They have a losing hand either way.
Victoria, finally, I want to ask you, what's your take on this?
If Mark Carney needs those votes from the opposition, then he needs to work for them. And the other parties have been willing, and he has not been eager to sit down and work and address their priorities. So if he wants those votes, I think he'll have to go and do that.
I want to thank you all for being here. This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having us.
Victoria Romero is a political science student at the University of Manitoba. Kai Giselle is also a student at the University of Manitoba studying economics, and Riley Gerard is an RRC Polytech student studying creative communications. We are talking about the federal budget. For more details on the federal budget, head to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. Stay with us. Your CBC Local News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 8:31. It is 1 degree, sunny today, a high of 6. We may see some snow enter our forecast tomorrow. Well, this morning, after the Liberal government tabled its budget, the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, is out selling it to Canadians.
Building the future we want starts with building the communities that we want. And some of the biggest investments in Budget 2025 are in local infrastructure, including through a new $50 billion Build Communities Strong Fund.
Carney speaking today at a public transit depot in Ottawa. He also welcomed Nova Scotia MP Chris D'Entremont to the Liberal Party. D'Entremont crossed the floor yesterday just as the budget was being tabled. He calls the Liberals' fiscal plan the best path forward for his riding and for the country. Manitoba Premier Rob Canoe sees good and bad for the province in yesterday's federal budget. Ottawa's spending plan mentions the Port of Churchill several times. It says export capacity in the north will be expanded through Hudson Bay with an all-weather road and marine ice-breaking technology, and reaffirms plans for upgrades to the port and rail line to Churchill. Canoe welcomes those plans, but says there's still something missing.
I think there was an opportunity missed today to signal that the bilateral funding agreements for your health care are going to continue. We got one of those expiring next year, $150 million. It goes to pay for staff in hospitals and personal care homes. We need to get these deals extended.
Canoe also wants to see more details of the budget's plan to spend more on agriculture at a time when producers are being hit by tariffs. The federal government is earmarking $51 billion over 10 years for infrastructure. It can be used for roads, health facilities, and water and waste projects. Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham says Winnipeg needs a chunk of that money for Phase 3 upgrades at the North End Sewage Treatment Plant and to help pay for other big-ticket projects.
I'll be looking at this for Kenaston Route 90 and Chief Peguis as well. Those are two very important infrastructure projects in the city of Winnipeg that are related to our city's economy, related to trade, and they're important to Winnipeg's future.
Gillingham says he recently met with the federal housing minister and talked about the importance of these very projects. A Winnipeg veterinarian has been ordered to stop his veterinary practice at the end of next June. The decision against Dr. Wenchao Zhang follows a regulatory hearing by the Manitoba Veterinary Medical Association. The hearing dealt with 4 complaints against Zhang, who operates Animal Hospital of Manitoba on Main Street. In one case, Zhang made an error in surgery on a cat, which later led to the cat's leg needing to be amputated. The decision says Zhang has an extensive disciplinary history with the regulatory body. Zhang says he is ready to retire and is trying to sell his practice. He says he feels he has been treated unfairly by the regulatory body. Well, bracing for an onslaught of holiday requests. Volunteers packing hampers with crackers, pasta, and canned goods at Winnipeg's Christmas Cheer Board. The charity started taking requests for holiday hampers yesterday, and they've already had hundreds of calls. Shauna Bell is the Cheer Board's executive director. She expects up to 22,000 requests this year.
The demand is exceptionally high, and we don't anticipate it getting any less this year. So we're going to try and accommodate every single one of those requests that come through.
Last year, the Cheer Board prepared 21,000 Christmas hampers, and Bell says soaring food prices are making it even more challenging this year. You can find more on those stories and other news as it's updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much for the morning, Heather Wells.
Thank you.
Heather Wells there with your CBC local news update. Let's check in with Abby and a final look at weather. Hi, Abby.
Yeah, sunshine lighting up the southern part of the province already, Marjorie. The north is seeing few flurries. We're still seeing light snowfall in Churchill. We're looking at temperatures up north between -10 to -1 this morning, and we'll see Thompson get to -6 later, and Flin Flon just 1 degree. While in the southern part of the province, we're looking at -4 to 0 at this time. Expect sunshine all the way, and temperatures will be around 6 degrees for most of the regions.
Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
Couple of traffic notes to mention here. Stalled car in the median lane, southbound Donald, just after River Avenue. Also, there is a collision that is blocking the northbound median lane. Waverly and Scurfield keep left to pass. It was a quiet morning commuter-wise, and a couple of tips there. So again, Donald, River, stalled car, collision blocking northbound median lane, Waverly and Scurfield. Coming up on Radio Noon today, we want to hear your reaction to the federal budget. So call after 12:30 and share your thoughts. Lori Hoog-Stratton hosting Radio Noon today. Quickly want to thank everyone who worked on the show today. Our associate producers, Chloe Friesen, Jennifer Dosso, Shannalee Vidal, Jim Agapito, our news department, Joni Nicolo, Megan Ketchison, Heather Wells, our YouTube producers, Darren Morash, technician is Abby Adiemi, show director May McKillop, Nellie Gonzalez is the show producer of Current Affairs, and Leif Larson is the senior producer of audio. I am Marjorie Dowhouse, filling in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Don't forget, the Information Radio team will be broadcasting live from Flin Flon tomorrow morning. Tune in then. Have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Coming up next here on CBC Radio 1, The Current. Have a good one.